I shall start again for the benefit of people watching it and needing to hear me say that. Welcome everybody. I am Councillor Chris Atwell, Vice Chair of the Planning Committee, and I will be chairing today's meeting. Limited public seating has been made available. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. So the meeting will be live streamed and everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera except for people sitting in this area here. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. If you're unaware how to use them, it's just the red button in front of you for on and off. Okay, we have a lot of business to get through today. We'll start with apologies. Councillor Judith Smythe is on leave and Councillor John Smith is away as well and is represented by Councillor Daniel Weems. I understand, Councillor Weems, you may need to leave about 2 o'clock or thereabouts. Okay, thank you. Members, any declarations of interests? Councillor Sanders.
Thanks, Chris. I have two. The first is that, like Dan, I might need to be away a bit early, but about 1:45, something like that. The second thing is that with regards to item 5, having checked this through with the planning legal team, although the development is for council housing, decisions on this have been taken by the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and not me in my portfolio role as the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness. Therefore, I am able to comment and determine the specific scheme, and I believe that Kieran and the legal bods are also okay with that, which is even more important.
Yes, that's correct. I've advised you previously.
Councillor Mason.
Two declarations of interest, Chairman. The first is concerning item number 1 and 2. I have known the applicant since he was a small child. I do not think this is relevant, but it is, but it would certainly not affect my judgment on the matter. So far as item 3, 7375 Marmion Road is concerned, I am acquainted with 2, and I use the word acquainted rather than know, acquainted with 2 of the deputies that we have this morning. I don't think that is a prejudicial interest either.
Thank you very much. A little back to front actually, we want to do some introductions I suppose. Members.
Thank you again, Chris. I'm Darren Sanders. I am the councillor for Baffins, North Milton and South Copner.
Good morning, Chair. Councillor George Fielding, Central Southsea Ward.
Thank you, George.
I'm Councillor Russell Simpson, Hilsey Ward.
Thank you, Russell.
Councillor Hugh Mason, St Jude Ward.
Councillor Daniel Weems, Hilsey Ward.
Councillor Robert New, Copner Ward, and also, Chair, I did have my hand up for the declarations of interest. Like others, I need to leave here around 2 o'clock for other meetings I have.
Apologies, Councillor New, didn't see you. Thank you. Officers, if you could introduce yourselves.
My name's Kieran Laven and I'm one of the Council's planning solicitors.
Good morning, Ian Maguire, Assistant Director for Planning and Economic Growth.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Alison Harper, Democratic Services.
Thank you, Alison. And if I could ask those giving deputations today to introduce themselves, if you could, thank you.
Abdul Basit, I'm trustee of the 75 Marion Road.
Thank you, Mr. Bassi.
My name is Iqbal Mia. I will be speaking in support of the Marion Road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Jane Mills, Cockleshell Community Sports Club.
Thank you.
Simon Hill, I'm speaking in support of 12 Thurburn Road.
Thank you.
Jackie Laver of Atalanta Close.
Thank you.
Luke Simmons, the Furness Road. I'm the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons.
Oliver Wilcox, Project Manager at Portsmouth City Council, speaking in support of Edinburgh House for Adult Social Care.
Thank you very much. Any other deputations? I had some people due to speak on the Royal Beach Hotel. No? Okay. Thank you, everybody. To business. We've got a lot to get through. So Furness Road is the first item on today's agenda. Ian, over to you. It's not ideal. We're still having a little bit of technical stuff to manage, and I shall be going backwards and forwards to be able to see the presentation, but we'll see how we go.
Chairman, do you not need to deal with the minutes of the last meeting?
Oh, entirely possibly. It's very possible. I think there's a whole chapter, isn't there? Shall we agree the 15 pages of minutes from the last meeting? Agreed. Councillor Fielding, seconded. Councillor Sanders. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The first item on today's agenda, which I'm hoping will appear imminently, Simmons Garage. This is the retrospective planning application for the change of use of the land that is south of the garage itself. So it includes the garage and a series of 9 garages located on Furness Road within the East South Sea Conservation Area. The proposal is to change the use of those 9 garages and surrounding lands to uses ancillary to the workshop of the garage. So that would be carrying out the minor repairs, storing of materials and parking of vehicles. Obviously, we have a number of residential properties in this area. It's a predominantly residential area, which is obviously the key sensitivity for this application. Both the Environmental Health Team of the Council and the Local Highways Authority have been consulted and have raised no objection subject to conditions. The application is therefore considered to be fully compliant with your policy. The key conditions I would note are the restriction in hours of operation, the types of repairs to be carried out, which can only involve hand tools as opposed to power tools. Another thing to note is a tree has been removed from the area to the land of the rear of the application, which they propose to use for parking and storage. There will be replacement parking that is planting that is secured through a landscaping addition on there as well. Obviously very happy to take any questions.
Well, we have a deputation.
We have one deputation from the applicant and no one speaking in opposition, so on that basis the applicant would go first.
Yes. Mr. Simmons. Thank you.
Hello.
6 minutes.
Timing. I've already introduced myself, so obviously you know I'm Luke Simmons and I run and manage Simmons & Southsea. We opened the garage in 1982. My mum and dad, who started the garage, retired approximately 20 years ago and I've managed it since. I have 10 employees who are part-time and full-time. In this time I've done my utmost for the customers, neighbours, who 99.9% are friends who I socialise with, and to help support and listen to the best ability I can. My dad used to open the garage 7 days a week in 1982 from early hours, 7:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night. I now only open 5.5 days a week, closing midday-ish most Saturdays, and I'm also closing about 30% of those Saturdays now, so I'm closed most weekends. I've also put an opaque double curtain across the front of the garage to help reduce the noise coming out of the garage and to stop people having to look inside of the workshop. I've applied for this planning as it came to light that I needed it for my signs and to do the minor work outside and to store in the lockups which we own. I also have applied for additional parking. This will help with less cars being parked on the highway, helping the area have more parking spaces. The work outside on our land and inside the lockups will only be small, medium work, i.e. diagnostics, bulbs, batteries, possibly washing cars, changing a spare wheel over if someone has a puncture, without using power tools, using hand tools, wipers, AdBlue, charging a battery, and general small jobs which we can do in a short period of time outside with no extra noise. This will allow cars to pull up, be fixed quickly and go. So in my opinion, less traffic, less noise and less people hanging around, because we only have a small waiting area inside the workshop, so sometimes they stand outside. Obviously what's happening at the moment is cars will pull up for a light bulb, they have to wait until I've got a space inside the garage, then the car has to come inside the garage, then we do the light bulb and then it has to go out. That can take an hour or 2 hours sometimes if I haven't got a space. Also, one of my signs which we've applied for is very faded and can hardly be read. The reason I haven't replaced this sign is because if planning isn't granted, I should just take the sign down. Obviously, if it's granted, I will arrange for a new sign to be put up. One of the other things I wanted to mention is that I store my old tyres and waste oil in sealed barrels in one of my lockups. The reason for this is, as you can see on the pictures of where the lockups are, when I had a fire inspection many years ago by the fire brigade, they sent an actual fire officer out. He told me this was the best place to store them for safety reasons and if there was a fire in the main workshop. And I've done that ever since. Obviously, if planning isn't granted for storage, then that has to go back into the workshop. But that is the reason why they're out there. Thank you for listening. I have nothing else to add.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Members, any questions on the application? Councillor Weems.
I just wanted to know how many noise complaints have been received ever since the operation of the garage.
Unfortunately, I don't know that information.
I don't, okay.
Councillor Mason.
How far is this application to regularise activities which are currently being carried on and have been carried on for some time?
So, with apologies, Member, I'll draw your attention to the SMAT, which has part of the answer to that question in as well. So there's a little update in the SMAT as well. But yes, this is a regularisation application. So this is a retrospective application. This is land, as the applicant mentioned, in their ownership, and they do and have used in a similar way to this. However, they are looking to formalise it. My understanding is they have suspended some of the activities while this application is carried out. But you'll have seen from the image I showed earlier where they've cleared out some land to the rear of the garage. Obviously that's an expansion and a formalisation of what they're proposing to do in that part as well. So the majority of this activity has been carried out in the past, but without the necessary planning permission. This retrospective application is obviously looking to regularise that circumstance.
Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Chris. In paragraph 111 and paragraph 511, reference is made to the Planning Inspectorate's original decision. And I just want to read out it, because I think this is useful. It says, planning permission was granted for parking and storing of vehicles in connection with the authorised use of the adjoining workshop, subject to the condition that the garages and forecourts shall be used only for the parking and storage of vehicles and shall not be used for the repair, servicing or paint spraying of any vehicle at any time. Is any of the site that is going to be used for these repairs part of that inspectorate decision?
Yes, I can confirm it does overlap. This is a large site, some more garages are added. The first 6 garages were part of that question, which limited, therefore, those activities. The activities that are now proposed under the control of the planning conditions does therefore allow some repair of vehicles, but only by hand tools, and not considered to have the same unrestricted concerns that the previous inspector raised.
But it does go against the planning inspectorate decision? Okay. How?
Well, the planning inspector looks at whether it would be reasonable to allow the garage to fully occupy, if you will, those 6 garages and use them for unregulated activity, including the use of power tools. We've looked at those garages and say, well, if you restrict the hours of operation, the nature of the operation, and including restricting it to hand tools, there would be no harm. So it's not against the inspector, it's fully in accordance with it that we quite agree with the inspector allowing the garage to use that space for a full suite of car repairs with noisy power tools with the longer hours, as the applicant mentioned, historically they may have operated, would be unacceptable. But with the restrictions proposed in these conditions, taking guidance from an environmental health officer, it would be perfectly acceptable in this location.
Sorry, for everyone else, the reason I'm asking is because there have been several decisions taken by this committee and recommendations that have been based around the views of the planning inspectorate of these people. Okay, is the planning inspectorate happy with these particular conditions?
There is no consultation process with the planning inspectorate. They only deal with appeals if an applicant is unhappy with a refusal or the imposition of conditions.
But just to clarify, what you're saying is that when it says it shall not be used for the repair, servicing or paint spraying, it's only certain types of repairs, paint spraying or servicing, that's actually covered in the decision. Is that correct?
Yes, so currently, and if we put the presentation back on the screen, that may be the easier way of showing you, the 6 garages that are purple are that which the inspector looked at and limited it to, effectively storage only, so no activity, so to speak.
Right. So what's going to go on there is consistent with the inspector's judgment, is that correct?
Well, so it is a evolution of the inspector's judgment rather than a consistency with it. Thank you. So the 6 garages, which are the pinky purple, you can see immediately south of the main garage unit, are now going to include some minor repairs with hand tools only. The inspectorate decision allowed the parking and storage in those garages, but no repairs at all. This goes one step further and does allow some minor repairs, but they're hand tools only, and thus ensures the inspector's concern about noise and disturbance is equally respected, but in a different way.
Thank you for that, Ian.
Members, just to ensure the smooth running of the meeting, questions and comments through the chair. You're very welcome. Any further questions? Okay.
As comment, Chair, so whenever you're ready.
Okay, we'll move on to comments.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great seeing all of these small family-run business garages across the city, actually. I'm quite a big fan of them, and I think actually the applicant that's come forward today, even though it's a retrospective application, is clearly trying to do all that he can do to operate in a very respective way in the local community. So on that basis, I would be happy to support the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor New. Any other comments? Councillor Sanders.
I'd be happy to second what Rob is proposing. I think the expansion is fine. I can't see issues around amenity. I don't understand the objector's views to say the planning application is untrue, because it seems true to me from the reports. I am concerned about the impact of the planning inspectorate decision, because previously we have said that the inspectorate's decision should be upheld, and this is going to go against part of that. But I think it is so minor that it may be some time that we might have to overlook it. I think if we did it, the applicant wouldn't go again. But if there is significant problems, then it's going to have to come back here. But with those conditions, I'm happy to second what Rob is saying.
Thank you, Darren. Anybody else? So, I have a proposer, seconder. You have your planning permission. Thank you. Oh, vote. Okay, sorry. I said I'll get better at this as we go along today. Okay, all those in favour? I think that's everybody's in favour.
That was unanimous approval of planning permission.
Okay. You have your planning application. Well, we've got another application. The second item.
So as well as the use of the garages, as the applicant mentioned in his deputation for the regularisation application, there's also a parallel application in for advertisement consent. There's a number of adverts on this site and surrounding it, listed in paragraph 1.7 onwards in the report. You'll see their locations, hopefully, yes, on that plan there. Relatively straightforward directional and business-based adverts. In the wider area, signs 1 and 2, and on the site, signs 3, 4, 5 and 6. So again, it's a retrospective application in that they already exist, but they are deemed to be acceptable and have no adverse impact on amenity or highway safety, which are obviously the key considerations for advertisement consent.
Thank you, Ian. We should note Councillor Vernon Jackson has joined us.
But I can't take part in this. I haven't heard all of it, so I'm shutting up.
Okay. But this is a new application. I can't quite remember when you came in.
Okay. So which one are we on now?
Number 2.
Okay. So in terms of, I'm sorry, this is still on Simmons Garages, isn't it?
Yes.
In which case I haven't heard all the previous discussion, therefore I think it is inappropriate that I take a view on this planning application.
Thank you. Any other declarations while we're...
Yes, when we get to Marmion Road, I have a declaration as well.
All right, okay. Okay, questions on the second? Councillor Simpson.
I'm actually in favour of the new signs. I think it's really, really good that the owner wants to change them. I mean, I don't think there's any... If they've already been there already, and I'm guessing there's no additional ones, I think it's good to have a clean sign that makes it look clean in the area instead of a fade sign, which the applicant has pointed out. So I'm in favour of the signs.
Thank you.
Are you proposing that, Russell?
Yes, I am.
I'm happy to second it. Obviously, I know there's questions, but...
Okay. Proposer and a seconder. Councillor Mason.
I think it is relevant that as the ward councillor for the houses which are closest to this garage and on Burgoyne Road, I have never received any complaint or objection to the signs. Secondly, I think that it is important that these small businesses should be able to advertise their presence. So I am very much in favour of this one.
Thank you, Hugh. Okay, we have a proposer, a seconder. Anything else? No? To the vote? 4? Okay, I think we're there. Thank you.
That's unanimous once we take account of the fact that Councillor Vernon Jackson was not participating.
Okay, thank you. You may go. You're free to leave. Okay, to the next item. Marmion Road. Yes, Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Chairman, I have... This is quite a difficult application, which has caused significant discussion within the community. I've attempted to negotiate between different groups on this to try to get a single view, but I have not been successful. But I think as I have had extensive discussions with both sides on this, I think it's inappropriate that I take part and vote on this application. So I'm sorry, I think I am conflicted.
Kieran.
Are you choosing to withdraw off the item, Councillor?
I am. Do you want me to disappear?
You can sit a bit further back. I think that might avoid any improper perceptions.
Okay. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So 7375 Marmion Road, it's the north side of the road, and we're in the Owens South Sea Conservation area. And that's the building. It's formerly used as a mosque, the Jami Mosque. However, following the relocation of that mosque to Victoria Road North, the building was used, as we understand it, as a madrasa, which included one self-contained residential masonette. The main building has, however, been vacant for a number of years, albeit that masonette, that flat, continued to have been occupied throughout that period. That's the existing period. You can see the two major community spaces on the ground floor and first floor, and then the ancillary spaces and indeed the flat on that lower part of the upper and lower floors there and the associated elevations. This is the proposal. It is an application to change that first floor into 3 self-contained flats, which would therefore also require some minor physical alterations, principally to the west elevation, to construct a porch, and there's also, you'll see a small blue blob bottom left of the screen, that's a bicycle storage area as well. The other alterations are, of course, internal. Just to give you some photographs of the current internals, you can see that small amount of current residential occupation that's spilled out a bit from the flat into the unused spaces. These are the external views. Again, you can see the courtyard to the rear and its use, and where the proposed porch would be on the top right of your screen, the build out there from that door. There has been a large number of objections, including a petition from the local Jamie Mosque community opposing the loss of the space for community use. However, there are no specific restrictions on such loss within your policies, and of course there is a positive presumption in light of delivery of housing due to your current position for a 5-year housing land supply. The proposed units comply with all your necessary environmental space standards, and the environmental health team are being consulted to look at whether there is any likely unacceptable transmission of noise or disturbance from the ground floor to be retained in that community use and these upper 4 flats, and subject to appropriate conditions to mitigate that, they are happy to do so. We can obviously note that there is a shortfall technically on parking standards, but that's really because we don't have a standard for places of worship or madrasa. So while there is no dedicated parking for these 3 flats, we've had to make a judgment of whether there is a likely impact on local highway capacity, safety or parking demand from this change of use, and we are satisfied that any change would be so minor that it would not justify a reason for refusal. Overall, the balance of issues falls to grant plan permission. There is a significant shortage of housing in the city, and consequently these flats will make a significant contribution to that. But members will, of course, have to look very sensitively at the large body of objections and letters of support from the wider community associated with this change of use of what is obviously a well-respected community facility, albeit one that has not been used for some time. When we are dealing with matters such as this, members do of course wish to give due consideration to the public sector equality duty, which a memo has been provided by our legal services team and attached to your supplementary matters papers circulated at the beginning of this meeting. Obviously I'm very happy to take any questions, but fundamentally I would just draw members' attention to, obviously it's not this place for this committee to arbitrate those challenging balances between local communities, as indeed Councillor Vernon-Jackson alluded to. We must assess the application against your policies, which has no specific restriction for the change of use from what is a use class F1 community institutional use to residential provision in this case, and consequently the recommendation is to grant planning permission having due regard to the Human Rights Act, the Public Sector Equality Duty and principally the development plan.
Thank you, Ian. We have some deputations. Mr. Bassith, if you'd like to give your deputation, you have 4 minutes. Are you doing? You're doing all. Okay, 6 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, respected Chairperson and the other committee members and other friends. I'm Abdul Basit, one of the 2 trustees and joint owner of the 7375 Marmion Road Mosque. As a trustee, I'm here to speak for the fastest growing Muslim population in Portsmouth and for their interest. As you know, the first floor, as you've seen, is designed about half a century ago, that historical building. It is now at the first floor a prayer hall specifically designed for the women and 3 rooms for the community purpose. 1 for committee room, 1 for small library and one consulting room. And that was the service designed and continued for a long time. An application is made to change these provisions into 3 flats. And I strongly, as a trustee, oppose this plan. And the grounds of this rejection or opposing this plan, I have to submit to you to consider there is an overwhelming needs in general for the use of this building by the community members, Muslim community members in Portsmouth. I'm not quite sure whether you are aware it or not. There are 7 mosques in Portsmouth, and only 3 got planning permission. And rest of the buildings, the people out of desperation using these for wrong purpose, wrongly, and it created a lot of problems with the neighbors and law and order. And we do not want to see this happening because it is a bad reputation for the Muslims in the community. So I would strongly suggest that, well, these groups can be easily accommodated and can be used completely of the whole building and save these communities from using wrongly or illegally other buildings, which is a bad reputation for the community at large. Sadly, this building was underused for a long time. I accept it, but it was not due to the lack of needs of the community. Several groups out of many years, several times, approached the applicant to let it use. Always it was resistant. The people I knew that were approached for renting, purchasing, or many other use, or renovating their own money and use for the purpose. It was rejected, and that is a sad. So I think for this purpose, it is important that the whole building should be used for the community purpose. Second issue is specifically the local residents, St. Jude's wards. There are lots of residents there, and I know they directly approached their councillors to have used this. And you know the growing population. There are elderly people, they cannot go far away. There are children and women, they are unable to go far away. So there are local residents and St. Jude's wards. They are very convenient for them to use this. And there are so many Muslims, all nationals, they approached many times through the councillors and through the applicant that, well, they wanted to build this. So you can see that, well, there is a specific needs in general, specific needs in the locally for the local residents. Thirdly, I have to raise one very important issue that, well, it is stated in the report 1.3 that 1 residential unit in the building is occupied. I am shocked to see this happening because if you know that, well, the whole building had the planning permission first in 1978, I refer 1.11, that, well, whole building was as a place of worship. And I understand if somebody is using this, it is contrary to the planning permission. And in the report it said it is continuously using as a residential unit. And I am very shocked that, well, it is happening in the contrary of planning permission with the whole building. In question of housing needs, I recognize the housing needs in Portsmouth and everywhere. Nobody should deny this. The fact of the matter, I know there are non-residential building in Marmion Road, vacant for long time, and never been used, never been converted into flats or houses. And it proves that, well, there is no overwhelming needs of housing for this area. The second issue is that, well, this particular housing plan of the 3 flats is incompatible for this particular place. You can imagine that ground floor is a prayer hall, and it is kept in the application it is said it is kept in the prayer hall. And upstairs is a 3 flats. It's virtually, imagine the people are praying, you know the praying is not daytime, nighttime, daytime, 5 times a day at dawn, and constantly people will go and attend there. And there will be, I am not worried about the sort of noise. I'm just worried, general environment is not there. It contradicts the use of peaceful and meditation in one place, and people are coming and going, and it doesn't make sense. It is not compatible to be a housing situation, particularly above the prayer hall, and it has to be considered very carefully that, well, it is not suitable in this particular building for this particular reason that, well, it is a place of worship. I see in the report that, well, the planning authority has actually referred some rules and legislation nationally and locally. But I just to point out, I'm a bit surprised that, well, the planning authority did not mention anything in the report, the Equality Act 2010, the section 149, which gives, as I understand, is the local authority's duty to fulfill the specific needs of specific people. Here is the Muslim in Portsmouth is disadvantaged, I have to say, because they are not finding a proper place for place of worship, using the other building, using the wrong building for the wrong reason. So I think it has to be considered, this act, to reject this one and put the importance of the community at large for using the whole building. Even if this case is approved, you can see only 3 people is getting benefit, only 3 single. And if you compare these thousands, hundreds of people, you can imagine that, well, how many people objected this. And I can see for the growing population, it will deprive thousands of people from this building, from using this building. What a nice building is, all the facilities provided. It's a secluded building with surrounding world. It is wonderful for the people of his, and it protects the, is really comfortable for use by our communities, and it will be deprived. So finally, I have to say that, well, this application was made on, if I'm wrong, about a year ago, first application, and the applicant actually said he is the only owner of this building. And I challenge this, that the applicant, that, well, you are not the owner, I am also the co-owner of this building. And the application was simultaneously withdrawn. And secondly, when he reapplied, out of courtesy, he did not. I tried to, I'm not going to refer anybody, I tried to sit down, try to negotiate, try to find out the fact, and he just totally ignored. And that is a sad. So, second time when he applied, he did not inform me. He did not actually, or his agent send me the 21 days notice. After 4 months, after I complained to the council, I did not get 21 days notice. After 4 months, I got the record, I got the copy of this. And this is how you see that, well, I don't think the application itself is equitable. So I leave it to your judgment. I like to conclude, it is the local authority's duty to fulfill the specific needs of the Muslim community in Portsmouth. Muslim communities contributing this Portsmouth City Council. They are part of it. They deserve to have good services, and they deserve to have this building to be used by them. I will offer the applicant to sit together and have a plan how to maximize its use. People are ready to spend money to renovate without any question. Make the building workable. There is no problem about money. There is no problem about other things. I'm prepared to sit down with the applicant and that will let us use it properly for the purpose it was built. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. We have another deputation. Mr. Muir, you have 6 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by thanking you for providing me with the opportunity to speak at this meeting. My name is Iqbal Mia. I'm a member of the Jame Mosque Committee, and I will be speaking in favor of the proposed plan. We are all here today for one common purpose and shared goals: to secure the long-term future of the Marmion Road Mosque as a thriving community hub for a local Muslim community. Though some may oppose over the merit of the proposed plan, we are united in our primary objective of seeing this mosque return to its former glories of being a vibrant place of worship, education, and community events. After numerous years of consultations with the committee and the members of the Jame Mosque and our site council, a resolution in the form of this proposed plan was passed. I will outline why I believe the proposed plan are the most pragmatic and workable solution to achieve the objective stated. I will not go into the details of the proposed plans as they have already been submitted in the form of the planning application. So I will broadly outline the objective of the proposed plans. By converting the first floor of the property into residential dwellings, the mosque will be able to generate a regular stream of income. This will financially enable major necessary refurbishments to take place in a short term. In the long term, the income will enable the mosque to maintain daily activities such as prayers, carrying out Islamic teaching lessons for students, hosting community events. Furthermore, with the mosque being self-sustainable and no longer so heavily dependent on charitable donations, the mosque will be able to provide its space for wider community. Groups, individual, either free of charge or for only a nominal fee. It is a fair point to question how has the mosque as a charitable organization ended up in a situation where it needs to move away from traditional fundraising to fund its daily activities. In the years gone past, this was precisely the model that this mosque sustained itself from. Charitable donation from students attending classes. However, as years progressed, student members declined, resulting in financial difficulty for the mosque. One of the reasons for this was the creation of a new mosque, an Islamic center in the surrounding area. Before year 2000, the only mosque in Portsmouth was the Jame Mosque Marmion Road. Today, there are 8 more mosques within Portsmouth and more mosques in Islamic center in the surrounding area, Portsmouth. While the Muslim population in Portsmouth has increased over the years, the population is divided amongst the greater number of mosques. Therefore, the traditional model of fundraising is no longer workable terms solution for financing of the mosque. Our research has shown partial residential conversion of the mosque have been carried out in other cities throughout the UK in the successful shift of charitable funding. I'm sure those opposing the plan share our vision for the mosque but disagree with our method of attaining that vision. To that, I would question, what is the viable alternative? The simpler answer is that there is no other viable alternative. The obvious alternative would be to look at fundraising the necessary funds to bring the mosque out of the states of disrepair that it is currently in. This is not practical for several reasons. The funds required to carry out the necessary works would be in order of hundreds of thousands of pounds. The Muslim community is not immune from the cost of living crisis. As a community, we are acutely aware of the effect of rising inflations. The decrease in disposable income and knock-on effect this has towards donations to charitable organizations such as our own, turning towards the Muslim community in this moment in time would simply be inappropriate and ineffective. Furthermore, even if the immediate remedial work managed to somehow be funded through fundraising, what of the long-term future? It will only be a matter of time until once again we are faced with precisely the same situation. Dwindling funds from reduced donations resulting in a necessity to cut mosque service. The proposed plans are account for this very problem. The regular stream of income will secure long-term future of the mosque in a way that no other solution can guarantee. I would like to conclude by stating that I pray at this mosque over the years. My children prayed and studied at this mosque for numerous years. It is within all our interest to see this mosque thrive for years to come, and the plan to put forward by Portsmouth Jami Mosque Committee does exactly that. I would urge the member of the committee to vote in favor of this plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Muir. I have a statement to read to members in respect of the application, and I shall read it now. So the committee will have noted that some of the representations made in respect of this application have raised issues relevant under our public sector equality duty. This, in summary, is our duty under the Equality Act, acting as a public authority to have due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity, and foster good relations amongst different groups. The Council's legal services have provided specific guidance on this matter in respect of this application. The issues raised are concerns in relation to the protected characteristics of religious belief and sex, and indeed the crossover or intersectionality of those who are both Muslim and female. This is because some representations have highlighted concerns that this application reduces the available space for Muslim worship, and that the part of the building, the subject of this application, has in the past been used as a prayer hall for women and would be lost for that segregated facility. Our legal services team have advised us how to correctly approach our duty in this case, which is a duty to have regard to the needs I have mentioned, and not a specific duty to achieve a result or maintain a specific status quo. It is for the religious authorities serving their worshippers, the owners of the building, and the wider Muslim community to decide how to utilise the spaces retained for worship within this application to support the whole of their community, and we, as a committee, are not the appropriate place to arbitrate how this religious community uses the spaces it has retained for their religious institutions, such as mosques and madrasas. We must also have regard to the current condition of the building and lack of recent use, as discussed in the officer's report. Members may also note, as described on the front sheet of the agenda, the need to ensure our decisions are compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, which includes freedom of religion in Article 9. This right must, of course, be balanced with other competing interests. Overall, we have been guided that, with due regard to the European Convention on Human Rights, our public sector equality duty, the current condition and lack of current use of the building, it is reasonable for us to grant this planning permission as described in the officer's report, if we are satisfied that the development plan and planning balance so indicates. Our only other option is to withhold planning permission, but the report sets out salient reasons why the partial loss of prayer facilities at the site is not felt to outweigh the reasons for granting planning permission. Members, questions? Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Chris, and through you, there are some questions I may need to ask which the planning officers may not know. Firstly, when was the last time this facility was used as a mosque, as a prayer hall?
Unfortunately, we don't know.
I mean, I remember it in 2001, but I'm not sure when. Does nobody know?
Would you like an answer before we proceed?
An answer at some stage would be helpful, because a lot of the objectors have said this is a prayer hall, and I understand that, and it's around when it was last used as a prayer hall. I think that's the first thing. The second thing, Mr. Basith said that essentially there is a flat there and it shouldn't be there. What I'm not clear about is whether that is, I understand that's Mr. Basith's view, but the view of the planners is also that there is a flat there. Does the 3 flats that are being proposed, Chair, include the flat that exists? Whether it should exist or not is a different story, but does it include the flat that exists at the moment?
No, the existing flat, which is partly on the ground floor, partly on the first floor, would be subsumed partly into one of the flats and otherwise returned to community use. So the net change is 2 flats as laid out.
Okay, so effectively we're increasing it from 1 to 3, notwithstanding Mr. Basith's concern that the flat shouldn't exist in the first place. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Basith, on that one.
But we don't have,
that's fine.
conversations across the
third thing is whether there has been any indication as to when or where this may be used as a prayer hall again. And if there's no indication has been given, I understand that, but it'd just be useful to know whether any indication has been given as to when this can resume being a prayer hall.
Well, so the application is obviously for a full renovation of the building. I would be doubtful they would be able to utilise it while the building work occurs, but the resultant development, if consented and built out, would be the 3 flats on the first floor, and then the ground floor perfectly capable of being returned to a community use. Obviously, as has been mentioned before, exactly how the owners of the building choose to use it for a community use, a non-residential community use, as a prayer hall or as any other community use, will be down for them to decide within the limitations of the use classes order F1, which covers this piece of land.
Okay. Is there anything in any of the conditions that you have outlined, Ian, sorry, Chair, in the conditions that you have outlined, Ian, that guarantees that the ground floor cannot be turned at any stage in future into flats, but stays as a prayer hall?
No, the planning system is unable to guarantee future uses. It says that is the current lawful use. Clearly, it's open for an owner to make an application to change the use. Someone could apply to change the use of the building and the room we sit in to a flat in the future. That's the nature of the planning system. Is always open for people to make a new application.
My final question, Chair, for the time being, I hope others will offer up some questions. There is concern around parking there. Is there a condition in, I haven't seen it, but my eyesight may be faulty. Is there a condition in the report, Ian, which says that those people who are living in these 3 flats, and we'll say the 3 flats because of the nature of the current flat being subsumed, are not entitled to permits for the parking zone?
No, there is no condition, nor would such a condition be lawful.
Why would it not be lawful as I've seen it applied elsewhere?
Anywhere it's been applied before would be unlawful. There is a clear case law on this. Whether or not a permit is granted on the public highway is obviously a land constriction for that piece of public highway, and thus can't be a condition on this piece of land, which is not public highway. It is not possible. Case law is very clear for you to impose a condition dictating how you would choose to issue permits for parking in the future.
Those are my questions for now. Chris.
Councillor Weems.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got 2. So the first one relates to parking, following on from Darren's questions. I just wanted to know why there wasn't a parking survey carried out at all, just because of some of the concerns raised by other residents. And then the final question would be, what is the capacity of the community space at present, or what it will be, just in terms of noise complaints for those flat people dwelling in those flats?
Ian?
The requirements for transport assessments and associated issues are covered by an SPD that dictates that certain levels of transport assessment are only required for larger developments. This falls below that threshold, and therefore there is no requirement upon the applicant to submit such transport assessment. It falls to you as the planning authority to make a judgment, therefore, on that basis of information. As I said, we don't have a standard for places of worship or community facilities, so it is, to be blunt, a common sense application of whether this change of floor space would result in more or less parking demand. In any event, we're talking 3 flats, so we're not talking a large number of vehicles, so even if you were satisfied it did cause an increase in parking demand, is that parking demand demonstrably harmful in such a way that plan permission should be refused, contrary to the presumption in favour of development that arises from your overall housing need? For the second question, the capacity of the community facility would depend on how you put the community facility towards it. So we work within use classes. As a planning authority, you work within a use class. Clearly, a prayer hall would have a different head count capacity to a different form of community activity that could occur, a school, for example. So consequently, the numbers, and you can swap between those two without any need for plan permission from this committee or this council as a planning authority. So we don't have specific numbers to say there is a capacity change. Obviously, there is a reduction in the overall community facility space because we're losing the first floor from that use to the new residential proposed use.
Just a follow-up question. So obviously, because of the space that's being lost on the first floor, there's obviously going to be some form of accommodation for those people moving down into the community space. So my only worry is, if that space is lost, you're then going to get a scenario where there's lots of people congregated in one room, and that might cause some noise pollution to those residents who are now going to be living in those flats above. So I'm just trying to get an idea of how many people are going to be in this space. I know it will probably change from day to day, but if there's an aspect where you've got 50, 60, 70, 80 people, I can imagine being a resident in that flat above, if there's 80 people below, that's obviously going to cause a lot more noise pollution than, say, 10 people or 20 people being spread across different floors.
As I say, we're in the hypotheticals, unfortunately. So the number of people and indeed the way those people are using that space will have a massive impact on the amount of noise those people will generate. It is not uncommon to have residential units above community facilities, and obviously different community facilities, and indeed day-to-day activity of different community facilities will have dramatic differences to the amount of noise output. A condition has been assessed by environmental health officers to put appropriate noise insulation levels, which should bring any reasonable expectation of noise down to a level which is not considered to be unreasonable for the flats above it. There's also a simple factor of the caveat emptor rule. Anyone moving into these flats will be fully aware that there is a community facility below them, and under the agent of change principle, we are required to consider the impact of that on any noise complaints we receive as an environmental health, as an environmental authority as well.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Mason first. Sorry, Rob.
lot hangs, I think, on whether we consider it is sensible or reasonable to change this from F1 use to C3 use. Can you, Chairman, enlighten us as to the current state of that building? We have heard that it, on one hand, one of the deputies says that with reasonable repair it could be used for F1 use. The other deputy says it is, gives the impression it is almost derelict. What is the state of the building at the present time, and could it be renovated at a reasonable cost?
Thank you. Ian?
Obviously a limited answer I can give because what is a reasonable cost? So it's currently being occupied partly as a residential space that obviously is an evolved space from the previous ancillary use as we understand it. So it is not a condemned building on that side, but it is certainly a building that very much in need of high quality repairs to bring it back into the sort of quality that I would expect any user for a community facility would expect to see from a community centre or other community building. What the actual costs are, we don't have that information. Obviously, it's not the applicant's intention to renovate the whole building for community use, so I doubt they will have done that detail for the purpose of this application, albeit they may well have done it for their own benefit. What we can say is that the site isn't in use at the moment, and that has been attributed and not widely disputed as partly down to the quality of the building. Your overall development plan policy is silent on the issue of the retention and protection of community buildings, and national planning guidance is similarly relatively sparse. There's one tangential mention in paragraph 93 of the National Planning Policy Framework that does encourage decisions to guard against the unnecessary loss of valued facilities for the community that would affect the community's ability to meet its day-to-day needs. So obviously if a building's not in use at the moment, even if it was in use in the last year or so, it's obviously having no impact on the community's day-to-day needs. Those needs are being met elsewhere under the current system, and that's largely where the planning system dictates. It's not for us to arbitrate how communities use their spaces. There are other methods, assets of community value, etc., that are in play to ensure communities can retain valued community assets outside the planning process, which obviously crosses over those planning issues and aren't engaged in this case.
Thank you. Councillor New.
Thank you, Chair. By happy coincidence, Councillor Mason has asked what I was going to ask, and I've now had the answer. Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you again, Chris. One of the arguments Mr. Basith put forward was essentially the Muslim population in Portsmouth is increasing and we need more capacity, and therefore there needs to be a maximum amount of capacity. In planning law, is that an argument that generates significant weight in our decision?
Kieran.
The weighting that you would give to a material consideration is one for a planning officer to advise on, not a lawyer, because it's the decision maker, not a legal question. You set the parameters.
Thank you, Kieran. I was hoping that Mr. Maguire would answer that, but thank you very much for your response, Kieran.
So we are, as I mentioned, paragraph 93 of the NPPF is what gives us guidance for plan making and decision taking, and it does advise us that we should plan to ensure there is sufficient infrastructure, including community infrastructure, and places of worship are referenced in a different paragraph, but crossing into that elsewhere. So we are under that obligation to have regard to that. As I say, then you drill down into the more specific one, and it is that section of paragraph 93, which is the only real useful guidance to us here, which highlights that we are to guard against the loss as well as plan for future, so the same issues, but it's the ability of the communities to meet their day-to-day needs. Obviously, as part of that, that would be your old infrastructure delivery plan looked at those issues and didn't identify a need for a particular growth in this area in the broader cultural and other infrastructure delivery. But that infrastructure delivery plan, which informed your 2012 plan, is of course relatively aged, your new plan will look at that again to see whether there is a need to protect against or seek to encourage those increased growth. That itself, however, is significantly undermined by the fundamental nature of the planning system, which is use class based. We can't assign spaces for mosques, synagogues, prayer halls, churches. We can only assign or seek to achieve use class F1, and obviously landowners themselves will be able to utilise how they wish to achieve that across the city and across the communities that those community facilities may serve.
Okay, so to summarise, thank you for that answer, Ian, I'm very grateful. So to summarise, the answer to my question is possibly, but the use class system creates barriers to doing that. Is that correct, Ian?
Yes, that would be a fair summary.
So the planning use class system that we have to work within generates barriers towards taking on board Mr. Basith's argument around essentially future planning.
Yes, I mean, it's not an impenetrable barrier because obviously there's always that mix, but fundamentally the broader barrier is the one that members are fully aware of land availability. You know, there's not enough land for all the new homes, all the new jobs and all the new community facilities and infrastructure we need, so there will always be arbitration of which is the overriding need, and in light of the current state and use of the building, when we compare that to the significant known housing need, that's what's been a key balancing factor for the officer recommendation.
Okay. Thank you for that. Chris, thank you for that. Thank you, Ian.
You're very welcome. Is there any way we can get an answer to Councillor Sanders' question about last use?
We have no records, so my team's looking through it, so they're from everyone I've got in the office today, they do recall that it was vacant in November 2018 when they happened to have personal knowledge of the site. So we know it's at least that far back, but we don't have any specific records, no.
Thank you. Councillor New?
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment now, if it's okay to move on to
move on to
comments.
comments,
I just really wanted to thank Mr. Maguire for giving a lot of information today, because I appreciate that the deputies were quite passionate in delivering their views on the application, etc. But certainly for me, it's kept me focused from the answers that the officers have given on what we're actually here to decide. So on that basis, I would be keen to propose the officers' recommendations, if there's a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor New. Any other comments? Councillor Mason.
I think we're in a position where we must make our decision on the grounds of planning law. There is quite clearly a division within the Islamic community in this city as to whether there should be a change of use. And since there is a division, this is not something which is within our competence to adjudicate on. We have therefore to assume that there is a prima facie case for change of use. And in that case is whether this is the mixed F1C3 use is suitable. I'm torn on this, personally, but I think we have to work within the advice which we've got legally that there is a strong case for the partial change of use of this building.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. As always, that's what we're tasked to do, isn't it, to consider planning law with every application that comes before us. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you. Firstly, Chris, thank you very much for completely gate-crashing our rules to allow both Mr. Basith and Mr. Mia the chance to express their concerns fully. They both went well over the time, but frankly, this is so important as this is so particularly painful for the Muslim community in our city that was completely justified and the right thing to do. So thank you for that, Chris. And it is a deeply painful and deeply divisive application. And either way, one group is going to be upset. I have two issues that I want to raise. The first is that there is I sense there's an understandable concern that at some stage in the future, the ground floor is going to be turned into flats. And I think it is absolutely essential that there has to be some sort of condition, guarantee, that the ground floor stays as a community space if this application goes through. And there can be no risk that the ground floor is turned into flats. I would like to propose that as a condition should this application go through, because I think that would offer some level of security.
Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, it is not a lawful condition to impose that. You cannot limit people's ability to seek a planning permission in the future. It is always open to landowners to choose to make the application. They would require planning permission to change those ground floors into flats, and it is at that time that the planning authority can exercise its judgment. It would be profoundly unlawful and unreasonable to prejudge such an application now.
Kieran?
I would just add to that, Councillor Saunders, that the condition you're seeking to impose might be appropriate if there were a permitted development right allowing you to go from F1 to C3. But essentially what Ian's saying is it's a truism that you would need a planning application before it would be allowed in any case anyway. So it would be a pointless and therefore unnecessary condition.
Okay, so what you're saying effectively is that the ground floor cannot be changed unless because effectively, if there is an application to turn the ground floor into flats, which personally I would regard as insane, then it would have to come back here anyway. Is that correct?
That's correct. I don't think Ian's going to contradict
Because
that,
it seems to me that losing the prayer hall on the ground floor would create significant problems, regardless of who did it. It's a community facility, and we need as many community facilities as possible. So I would want it to be, if colleagues are okay, regarded as the view of this committee that the ground floor should, if this goes through, the ground floor should stay as a prayer hall and a community facility. That could be through an informative, or it could be through something else. Kieran?
You would, of course, need to receive any given application on its own merits and not predetermine the matter, wouldn't you, Councillor?
So you're telling me no?
If such an application arises, I'm sure you will take everything you need to that's material into account at the time.
So you're telling me no?
Yes,
Thank you. That's perfectly fine, Kieran. Straight answers, straight questions. The second bit that interests me is the parking, because the Highways Authority is really concerned about the parking here. From what I remember of the mosque from 20 years ago, there were plenty of people coming out on Friday afternoon, and that's perfectly understandable. I know from the Kingston Prison application that there was something in there that said that the people who lived at the prison could not have permits for the HA and NA parking zones. In other words, the zones bang next door. Therefore, can that be applied here so that it does not, so that people who come in here do not have significant parking stress on the area?
Ian.
As mentioned earlier, so the key case law in 2020 made it perfectly clear that no such a condition, saying that future residents may not have a permit, is not a lawful condition and thus could not be implied to the planning permission.
For colleagues' benefit, the Kingston Prison decision predated 2020. So the answer again to my question is no. Is that right?
That's correct.
I'm tempted to say thank you, Chris. I'm not sure I should, but thank you, Chris.
It's always useful to thank the Chair. Well, we have a proposal on the table to move the officer's report. Any other comments, thoughts, views? As a committee, we have to consider the planning consideration. Think about the planning considerations, and so I shall second the proposal on the table to move the officer's report. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Thank you.
Forgive me, I didn't get time to record
Sorry.
the number of abstentions.
I think you get a casting vote on this as it was 2-2.
Chris, can I change my mind? And can I vote in
Well,
favour?
did you get the numbers?
Right, as I'd recorded it, as I've already said, I didn't get the number of abstentions because you were all rather quick. I saw 2 in favour, 1 against. That was you.
Yeah, you.
I didn't see your hand up, but you're saying your hand was up against. Okay, so we have a 2-2 draw with everyone else abstaining, in which case it would be Chair's casting vote. Thank you, Councillor New.
Thank you. Well, I've already voted for, and I shall stay with that.
So, faced with inequality of votes, the Chair has cast his vote in favour of granting planning permission in accordance with the officer's report.
And we shall have a 5-minute break. Thank you.
we have members of the public here, Chair, and it's... Well, they were given 5 minutes. It's taken... They can count as well as anybody else.
I'm happy to start, if you want to. Well, we've got Anna. We haven't got anybody to press the button. We're missing somebody to press the button. Okay. No, okay. Advice is that we should not proceed yet.
Anna's taking the minutes, Leader. Should not. Well, we're fully behind to the taking minutes until Anna appears. Anna is here.
Ah! Anna, we can do nothing without you.
So she's still.
Well, can we let Anna sit down first? It's all going rather well, isn't it? You okay? Good. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. We continue with the next application, which is Dover Road. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So 187 Dover Road, this is a single-storey rear extension at committee at the request of Councillor Smith. There is the site, members. Yep. A fairly recognisable Portsmouth property. The proposal is to put a single-storey rear extension following demolition of existing and the re-rendering of the rear elevation. That is the extension. At the time of the officer's site visit, it was mostly complete, as you can see, so it's a partially retrospective application. Key thing, members, what we have here is a prior notification was given, so a notification of the intention to undertake a general permitted development or a PD extension under a 2020 permission confirmed to be acceptable. That extension was 4 metres deep, 2.95 metres high. What the applicants actually ended up doing is 4.2 metres deep, 3.3 metres high, so it's a bit bigger, hence the new applications come back in to regularise that difference. So this is the extension as built, as is being proposed, and the key impact, as indeed was the case for the 2020 prior notice, is the impact on the neighbours. You can see it does extend beyond the rear neighbours' conservatory, the top right image on the screen here, and at that higher height. However, we are only talking, 20 centimetres. A foot, 20 centimetres longer, a foot taller than the consent previously given, albeit that the shape of that side wall does present that elevation quite starkly. So it's the impact on that neighbour is the key consideration. But when we balance it against what can be undertaken under permitted development rights, in any case, we are satisfied that this impact, while not ideal on 189, is not so adversely detrimental to warrant the withholding of planning permission. recommendation is consequently to grant permission, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, no deputations for this item. Members, any questions? Councillor Williams.
I noticed obviously you've gone over the amount it said it would. Is that an anomaly within Portsmouth, or does that happen often? So I'm just saying, obviously they've gone against our policy. I just want to see how often that happens in the other areas of Portsmouth. So if it's like a one-off, then.
Two very different questions. They haven't gone against our policy. They've departed from that which was previously recognised as being an issue. So whether or not we are satisfied it is compliant with policy, as in it is a reasonable extension to a dwelling proportionate to the size and not having a material adverse impact on neighbours. So it's compliant with your policy in our recommendation to you. Do people undertake development that departs from the general permitted development order? Yes, across the country, every single day. The order is a myriad and complex piece of guidance. Most builders haven't got a clue how it works. And on that basis, even with normal building tolerances, you'll frequently find minor departures from it as builders get on site and start building out what they think is a better solution to that which an applicant or a homeowner in this case chooses to put forward. So unfortunately, it's not uncommon.
So you think 1 foot is obviously a small altercation to what was previously dictated?
Apologies, I can't quite hear you.
So I'm saying, obviously, I'm asking, you think that 1 foot is a small altercation compared to what's?
Yes, in this case, so the increased depth, 4 metres to 4.2, so 20 centimetres, is very minor, to be honest. That height, the overall increase in maximum height is really that big impact. That top right image shows that. Whether or not it's a significant or an insignificant change, we find it an acceptable change, albeit it certainly is a notable feature when looked at from 189, the neighbour.
Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Simpson.
Question for you, Ian. So when they got the permission in the first place, and the light loss was considered, I'm guessing there was no objections about the permission before. So essentially we are talking about 20 centimetres, is it, of extra loss, light loss. It just seems a very small amount to be upset about in comparison to what it, if they objected the whole extension, that would make more sense. So is it a case that the loss of light is that impactful on the neighbour?
We don't have it up anymore. So yes, the neighbour that we're concerned with obviously is to the south, so it will by definition have an impact on light. It's not quite a north-south road, so the existing orientation of the dwelling already has an impact. The neighbours did object to the first application on the basis of all block light to their conservatory, and it is a larger, taller building against their conservatory than was previously, and so they're not incorrect. The judgment, as always, is whether that impact is an unreasonable one, and so unreasonable that plan permission should be withheld. So they raised the concern before, quite properly. The council looked at it and judged that 4 metre rear extension with a different roof form, different shape, was acceptable. This is now a undeniably larger issue with an undeniably greater impact, but we are still satisfied on balance that the impact is an acceptable one.
Councillor Sanders.
Firstly, a minor declaration. In my role as one of the councillors for this road, I have been in the House of 189, but that is several years ago, dealing with other planning applications. Why has this... so the planning permission that exists is 4 metres and 2.95 metres. That's correct, Ian. So that's happening. Why has the applicant extended this by 20 centimetres out and 25 centimetres up? Has the applicant ever given you a reason?
I'm unaware of a reason, but as I say, it's not uncommon because it's a general permitted development order prior notification, so you actually don't have to submit detailed plans under the general permitted development order for such
and that's the 3 metre thing that you talk about in your
actually, but this is the 4 metre thing. You can build a PD rear extension 3 metres. You go home and do that right now, if you like, to your house. If you want a 4-metre rear extension in your terrace house, you have to give us prior notification, and we can only then judge the merits of it if a neighbour objects.
Yes.
In this case, a neighbour did object 189. We judged the merits and found it to be acceptable. But the standard of drawings required to be submitted for prior notifications are effectively nil. You just have to say, I'm going to do it in accordance with the GPDO. So the neighbour previously would have had limited information to make their judgment, albeit they quite rightly raised a concern about it. They've now seen obviously a specific issue, and because there are limited drawings required for planning, I have no way of knowing, of course, what drawings the applicant presented to their builder to deliver the development, and the builder may have, through normal building tolerances or misunderstanding of the complex rules of the general procurement order, made these minor alterations to the overall scheme that has a impact, obviously, on the neighbours and the overall development.
Yeah, it's just that, as previous colleagues have said, it's such a small difference that you've got to ask. Well, that's why I was asking why, and whether there was any reason that was given, because I think that would be useful, as it is such a small difference to what already has consent.
Thank you, Chair. I can probably help you with that, actually, Councillor Sanders, because my question was going to be basically along those lines. And thank you to Mr Maguire for basically pointing out that it's actually a very insignificant amount. The only reason we're actually debating this is because the former councillor for Baffins brought it forward to this committee, as it says on the report. I think I'm correct in saying that. And on that basis, I think it's quite interesting seeing that everybody is as bemused as one another on this, that it seems like the officers would have been able to have quite competently dealt with this on their own away from this committee, and frankly it's wasting our time.
Shall we? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Can I propose we offer some recommendations on this?
You can. Seconded by Councillor New. Anybody else before we go to the vote? In favour? Against? Nay. Yes, they are. Okay, onwards. Land at former Edinburgh House.
Chairman, Councillor Vernon Jackson has raised his hand.
Chair, as a member of the Cabinet, this is a PCC proposal. I don't think there's a conflict, but I think because we're members of the Cabinet, this is not something for my committee that I'm proposing, but I think it's sensible to say I think this is a personal but non-prejudicial interest.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson. I would have advised you on the same terms that I've advised Councillor Sanders already, that he discussed and disclosed before you arrived this morning. So that's fine. I see no issues with you as long as your mind is clear in terms of having no bias or predetermination in relation to the application.
I think it's pushing it to say my mind is clear on anything at quite a few times. But anyway, but thank you for the advice.
That's true for me.
Chairman, this is an application for the construction of a 3-storey building to accommodate 50 extra care apartments, which will be provided as affordable housing by Portsmouth City Council, associated turning heads, parking areas, landscaping, etc. to be included. This site obviously previously was a care home, and the buildings have been demolished. Just an image just to get you going. That's what it looks like as seen from the south. This is an area where we've had a number of different applications come forward almost simultaneously. The fire station you can see in the middle there, recently granted by this committee, the new Highclere GP practice approved by office delegation, and the new care home for 50 apartments with its central courtyard you can see on the left of this image. I won't take you through lots of plans. It's a fairly self-explanatory scheme. I think we provided some plans within the agenda. So some images just to contextualise for it. You can see one from the south, the main road there, and one from the north, the parking area, which would be the main access, inevitably, into the building, and then the elevation drawings giving you the true depiction. You can see some of the complicated land levels the site is dealing with there as well. The site has a central courtyard, landscaped area to serve the future residents, not an unusual feature for such issues that often are dealing with residents with higher needs, dementia needs, etc., where you would obviously want to give them access to pleasant outside space, but may need to ensure you're undertaking necessary supervision and support to those residents. These aren't care home beds in a ward, these are self-contained apartments. So they actually fall within use class C3, the general dwelling house issue, albeit the intention is from your adult social care team, as Portsmouth City Council, is to utilise these different flat types for that extra care provision and provide them all to the affordable housing register for your housing department to utilise. That is the overall design and appearance of the building. As you can see, some communal spaces provided on that ground floor around that entrance to the north, coming in from a linked road which goes through to go and provide access onto the fire station's private access off the right hand side of this image. Landscaping central courtyard, retention of trees where possible, some trees are removed, and that what they're calling a treed area, woodland garden over to the eastern boundary between that and the fire station, where some trees can be retained and some further amenity space provided. A number of conditions are imposed on the application, and I draw your attention to the SMAT. In particular, the applicant has expressed concerns about one of the conditions proposed, which prevents occupation of this development until such time as a number of highway works off-site are provided. These are highway works to be provided by the City Council as a highway authority as part of a broader South East Hampshire Rapid Transit highway works funded through the Transforming Cities Fund, so it's not a financial burden to the applicant to deliver those issues, but obviously is a risk to the applicant's timeline if those projects are delayed and the necessary surrounding improvements do not come at the time they wish to occupy the site. However, our Highway Authority has given you guidance that they are satisfied that this scheme does have a significant risk for capacity and safety until such time as those works are done, and consequently they have recommended a condition to prevent that occupation until those works are completed. As I say, current timelines don't make that a problem, but obviously one can understand why the applicant will be concerned that that work out with their control may dictate their overall occupation. They have therefore requested that application be removed, but in line with the Highway Authority recommendation, we are not proposing to do so. As a matter of clarity, we've also suggested an additional condition just to ensure that the residents the staff and other parking is provided on site in accordance with the applicant's intention in any case. Those issues of conditions are laid out in the SMAT. You do have one deputation from the applicant, who I believe will also be reading out a statement by the portfolio holder for adult social care as part of that deputation. Otherwise, I am very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ian. Mr. Wilcox, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for giving me the time to speak today in support of the Edinburgh House extra care home application. In terms of the proposal, I'd just like to add to Ian Maguire's excellent introduction that it's a highly sustainable building. It will achieve a BREEAM Very Good rating, putting it in the top 25% for sustainability credentials of new buildings. This will be achieved through extensive use of photovoltaic panelling, air source heat pumps, and highly energy efficient underfloor heating. The accommodation, 50 extra care apartments, which are self-contained. They will also include communal lounge, dining room, a well-being centre, as well as the central secure courtyard garden area. In terms of the site, the application site is considered to be in a sustainable and accessible location within 150 metres of the Cosham District Centre, with a wide range of shops and services effectively on the doorstep. The site is within the proposed boundary for the Cosham Strategic Development Site Draft Planning Policy S4 towards the draft Portsmouth Emerging Plan. This draft policy seeks high-density housing through the efficient redevelopment of sites and access to a good range of public transport connections, which it does have. The application is accessible for pedestrians, cyclists, any vehicles, and obviously the good public transport routes there as well. In terms of the city's need for this scheme, the Portsmouth Ageing Population Strategy 2010 to 2020, the Joint Strategy for Health and Social Care of Older People in Portsmouth 2005-2008, and the Joint Accommodation Strategy for Older People 2006 to 2016 all recognise the benefits of additional extra care provision, that being of residents maintaining well-being, better health, activity and independence for longer over nursing or residential care. It will be of no surprise to anybody that with the increase of population, we are also seeing an increase of age of that population in Portsmouth. The Portsmouth Local Housing Needs Assessment 2019, which was a draft report, that's in 28th of October 2019, looked to forecast demographics over the 20-year period 2016 to 2036, which it estimates 25,000 additional people, population of Portsmouth, and of that 25,000, 16,400 will be over 60. The report then goes on to estimate that around 1,370 extra care homes will be required in Portsmouth to meet demand over that 20-year period. 910 of those will need to be owner-occupied, and 460 of those will need to be for rent. In terms of long-term engagement that we've had with the planners from early on in the design of this building, we've made numerous changes to address any concerns that have been raised. So we've reduced the number of the apartments down from 60 to 50. This yielded us the opportunity to allow for a much larger central garden amenity space. It's 50% larger than originally planned for. We have enhanced the external materials for the building to be of a greater visual quality. We have upgraded a southern entrance to become more of a focal point of that building, of that southern elevation. And we've added 300 metres square of a green roof, which will achieve a net biodiversity gain of over 12%. In terms of engagement with the local community, I've been involved with numerous public consultations for Portsmouth City Council, and by far this has been the most positively received proposal I've been involved with over the years. Well, on the 14th and 15th of September last year, we conducted 2 community drop-in events, so they could chat to us, the architects, about the scheme, and over 350 people attended those events, whom 146 questionnaires were then returned to us either by post at the event or online, and 96% of those returned were in favour of the scheme. The themes of the responses that were running through those returned questionnaires were I picked out that it was seen as an ethical use of the site. The public really liked the sustainability credentials of the building. They really liked the communal space, the central courtyard garden, and that it was seen as an asset to the local community. So, in conclusion, it's considered that the proposed Edinburgh House development has been very carefully designed to ensure that the building is of a size, scale and appearance that would enhance both the Southampton Road and Sundridge Close street scenes. Additional care has been taken to ensure the building is of an accessible and a sustainable construction, whilst also providing the building's future vulnerable occupiers with a comfortable internal environment. And this is reflecting best practice from day one in the design phase. We are of the view that the proposed development is compliant with national and local planning policy, and as such we respectfully request that members of the Planning Committee look favourably on this much needed development and resolve to grant planning permission.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Would you be able to read out Councillor Whittington's
Yes, bear with me.
paragraph?
I've not seen this yet. It's in my phone. I didn't
Take a
plan
moment
this.
to read it first, then.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'll do it on the fly. I'm sure it's absolutely suitable. Right, okay. So these are the words of Councillor Matthew Winnington, Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care. Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care. The planning application that you are considering today for the Edinburgh House site is an important one, not just for the provision of extra care accommodation for Portsmouth, for people with dementia in Portsmouth, but also to help provide more sustainability for social care as a whole in Portsmouth. Back in 2018, when I first became Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care, I asked officers to assess the areas of care provision where there were gaps in the city. One of these was dementia extra care, and it is from here that this scheme has come up. Up until now, if people are at the right stage in their dementia journey to need extra care, there is no place in Portsmouth to go. And this means that either people with dementia at that stage of their journey are either in accommodation that is inappropriate or have to move out of the city and pay significantly more money to be in the right kind of accommodation for their needs. Professionally as well, being in my day job, the manager of a support service for people with dementia and their carers, I know how much the right home environment for people with dementia at different stages is important to ensuring that their quality of life and well-being is as good as it can be. The application before you meets that need, is designed with people with dementia at the heart of it, and includes the very best practice for the best care. It is an ideal, well-connected location for amenities, for residents and visitors, and will serve the needs of a community with a growing need for accommodation for people with dementia long into the future. I'm proud of the significant work that has gone into this application and wider project by officers from right across the council, and ask that you back this application today to ensure that Portsmouth fills a much needed gap in its social care provision with a state-of-the-art dementia extra care facility. Regards, Matthew.
Thank you very much. Okay, members. Questions? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Can I ask through you, Chair, two things? On the images, I couldn't see pictures of photovoltaics. I've seen in the report that there are some. Is it just missing from the images? And secondly, I know this is going to be next door to the new fire station and police station. Have there any... I'm concerned about, for people living with dementia, the sound of lots of emergency vehicles emerging with their sirens going. And it's very close to QA, where there seem to be masses of ambulances around. Have we thought that through in terms of the disturbance to those residents living there?
So each question in turn. Yes, I'm not sure the images showed the photovoltaics. The nature of the buildings, they probably wouldn't have been visible from the artificial viewpoints that those axiometric designs were presented, but it is the applicant's intention to include some, as always, at the planning stage, where we're not prescriptive on how one can achieve best practice to achieve sustainable construction. We impose a relatively standard condition, condition 16 of the report in this case, requiring them to achieve a certain level of fuel and power conservation under Part L and above Part L of the building regs. So it's then for the applicant to decide how they wish to best achieve that in accordance with good practice in this area. As members, I'm sure, are aware, of building regulations under Part L changed in December of last year, and it's a big step forward. So there's a lot of additional pressure, and building regs bite when you do the building, which comes in June. Actually comes in this month. I need to double check. So the applicant will have a very high bar through building regs to meet on the issue of fuel and power, as well as shading and heating as well through building regs in any case. Your next question around noise, I've just as I briefly skirted through, but I'll draw specific attention to the comments we have received from the Environmental Health Department, which we've mentioned in the SMAT. They are proposing an additional condition requiring Condition 2 to add a condition that secures the implementation of noise mitigation measures, which is already outlined in the submitted noise impact assessment. So the applicant's already proposing a degree of noise protection within the noise impact assessment, and will secure that by condition. But certainly the noise disruption associated with its proximity to the fire station is a major negative of the scheme, and has received critical comment from the public health team. But as always, it's a balance to be struck on those different impacts. The applicant has tried to minimise and mitigate that adverse noise from the road, nearby school, and obviously the fire station on there. It's not an ideal place on that basis for it, but obviously it is proximity to Cosham Centre, etc., and connectivity to public transport, various other reasons. The applicant has decided this is the site they wish to site this, notwithstanding a fire station right next door.
Councillor Mason.
In 2.5, we're looking at the fire station development, and it suggests that the returning emergency trucks will identify Sandridge Close. Vehicle access for would be through the application site and a shared access way. Is this for egress from the fire station in an emergency, or is it just for entry to the fire station?
We put the slide back up on screen. It is entry to the fire station. The site has the rear access road runs the full length of the site, which is going to be quite tricky to do as I bend over, but hopefully. There we go. The full length of the site here, and indeed this turning head is part of the application site, albeit it's in the fire station land, and then obviously a car park for the fire station for fire service personnel and visitors, and then the access through for fire appliances. Blue light exit very much through this directly onto the A3 here, and this as part of the consent this committee gave is limited only for that emergency exit, because it's obviously not an ideal place to be just pootling in and out. So you will get exiting from Sundridge from the cars here, and you could technically have fire appliances exiting there in a non-emergency circumstance, but the intent is to take them out through the controlled spaces straight onto the A3.
And so that would mean that there is no likelihood of fire appliances leaving on that Sundridge Road, blues and twos going, upsetting the people.
Exactly so.
Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Chris. How far have the concerns expressed by the Designing Out Crime team and also the Housing Enabling team been taken on board by the applicant?
So as far as I know, obviously for the applicant to decide how well they've taken them on board, they have fully considered them. As always, it's a compromise, seeing what those individual specific groups will want to comment, but we are satisfied in the round the scheme is acceptable, both in respect of community safety and crime, and indeed in terms of housing provision and quality of provision.
Good. Any more questions before we move to comments? Comments on the application? Councillor Sanders first.
Thank you, Chris. I propose that we move the officer recommendations with the additional conditions outlined in the supplementary matters. Those particularly deal with the significant concerns around people getting in and out, and the highway issues, and also the noise issues that are inevitable when they're next door to trying to do a new fire station. It is part of a wider plan for Cosham, which is good news and long overdue, and it also provides, as both Oliver and Matthew Winnington have said earlier on, vital accommodation that is needed across the city, and so it is on balance a good scheme, as something that is needed, and I'm happy to move the officer recommendations.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to second that. I think it is a very good, well thought out proposal. It is in the right place, and it is a very sensible part of the whole Cosham redevelopment plan.
Councillor Williams.
I was just going to second it, and I just echo what Councillor Sanders and Councillor Mason have said.
I think, Councillor Sanders, I understand the need for this type of facility, and as do, I suspect, other people in this room. It's very welcome, isn't it? Anybody else? No? Okay, we've got a proposer, a seconder to the vote for. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Royal Beach Hotel.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the east wing of the Royal Beach Hotel. The current east wing, which you can see highlighted, red on that screen, provided 63 hotel bedrooms, but it had permission in 2010 for conversion into 9 maisonettes and 31 flats. So just to distinguish, 9 maisonettes, 31 flats, to the current proposal, now 3 maisonettes, 26 flats. So the overall unit numbers are unfortunately going down. That has been a response to necessary design improvements and changes that have been brought in during the planning application and indeed by the applicant's own proposal. The application involves the site and issue, and the site, if you don't know it, a load of photographs, which I'm sure you're all fully aware of the site. That's the wing at the back there you can see on the left. The applicant involves, I'll just skip through to a useful image, the construction of a mansard roof on top of the east wing that provides some of those additional units as well as that internal conversion. Take us back now. Key issue, just to highlight for members, is on the lower ground floor. Two additional units were originally proposed when the application was made, and concerns were raised by the Environment Agency because this lower ground floor is at risk of flooding. These 3 maisonettes also have accommodation, by the nature of being a maisonette, on the upper floor, so consequently occupiers of these maisonettes can escape upwards in a flood event and are not put at risk, whereas these 2 flats were fully contained on the ground floor and therefore had no opportunity for such escape. They have therefore been deleted from the scheme, and that space just left vacant for future development as and when the flood risk may change as part of the application. Overall, the application is extremely similar to that granted in 2010, albeit with alterations and changes to the layout, and obviously that overall smaller number of units compared to the 2010 permission, but otherwise pretty much identical. As is covered in the report, I would note you do have 6 units, 2 on each of the first. There's 8 units, 2 on each of the first, second, third and fourth floor that fall short of your minimum size requirements potentially. However, they do meet the smaller requirements proposed by national space standards for 1-bed, 1-person flats and 1-bed, 2-person flats accordingly. So while there is a minor infringement, and for clarity, it's these 2 flats on each of the floors, the ones highlighted in red there, on each of the 2 floors, which do fall below the standards for larger 1-bed and larger 2-bed, but they do meet the standards for smaller 1-bed and smaller 2-bed. So overall, officers are satisfied this is an acceptable residential environment for future occupiers. The design, as I say, is very much near identical to that in 2010, the key change being the mansard roof alteration, as well as obviously some tidying up of the front elevation. The only other complexity to bring to members' attention is the matter of affordable housing. Obviously, this is the creation of a number of new dwellings, because an affordable housing contribution in accordance with policy would be required. However, that was also the case in 2010 when this, and indeed another more historic application, were considered, and affordable housing for that conversion and a rear building, which you can see on this image here, has already been provided in advance and in anticipation of the development of this site. So you've already got your affordable housing. Indeed, at the Casey's Bar site, 20 affordable flats some time ago, so it would not be appropriate to double dip that and require them to re-provide again more affordable housing. Due to the reduction in numbers, actually, they're over-providing for affordable housing and have provided it many years in advance, so a double positive on that basis, and we're satisfied, therefore, fully in accordance with your policies. So while there is a small reduction in the potential delivery, there are sound reasons for it occurring in this case, and we're happy to support the application for 3 masonettes and 26 flats and the necessary alterations to achieve that. Our recommendation is to grant plan permission, and obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Ian, no deputies. Oh, we have. Hello. Welcome. Who have we got?
Stuart Bone of PWP Architects.
Welcome, Mr. Bone. Are you the only person?
David Blackford. I'm the chairperson of the Mansion Court Residents Association.
Will you both be giving deputations, or you will? Okay. All right. Mr. Bone, I think we'll start with you. 6 minutes, starting now.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. I aim to be brief. As the officer stated, there is an extant permission for the east wing of the hotel to be converted into 40 dwellings. That permission contained a larger proportion of 1-bedroom flats and smaller 2-bedroom flats. Closure of the hotel due to COVID in March 2020 led the applicant to carry on fully towards developing the extant scheme. However, the applicant has begun to rethink the units. Lockdown and greater instances of home working has led the developer to reconsider the apartments with a desire to create larger flats, leading to better options for the residents, reducing the number of 1-beds, allowing for larger flats to better accommodate home working, and the general improvement in space for the benefit of future residents. The reduction in numbers of dwellings from 40 down to 29 also reduces the impact of the scheme in parking terms in the wider neighbourhood, although there is no parking on the site as per the previous 40 permitted application. We note that the new condition number 7 for a travel plan and car club, this sort of condition did not feature on the extant permission, but we are happy to work with the local authority on this new condition by making it work again for the best benefit of the wider neighbourhood. We note that condition 10 in the report is incorrect, and this has been pointed out to the planning officer as it uses the wrong part of the building regs, i.e. it should be L1B rather than L1A. And we are grateful for the recommendation by the officer to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 6 minutes.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As I mentioned just now, I am the chairperson of the Mansion Court Residents Association. Now, Mansion Court is a retirement complex to the rear of the Royal Beach Hotel. We share a common service road to the rear of our properties, that of Mansion Road, and we are basically supporting this proposal for the reduction from 40 units down to 29. Now, I have to be honest with you all that this has not always been the case. As you will see, if you look on the planning site, on your council site, you will see that there were several objections from residents of Mansion Court, myself being one of them. However, I think the best way that I can explain this is to liken it to buying a piece of flat pack furniture from somewhere like IKEA or B&Q, taking it home, unpacking it, spending a few hours with a screwdriver, putting it together and ending up with a lopsided, three-legged, backward-facing cabinet that's meant to be a bookshelf, for example. And in this instance, we sort of jumped the gun a bit by thinking of objections to this proposal, when in fact, when we looked at your council's website at the planning application, we realised first of all that permission had been given back in 2010, and that for the 40 units, and of course that was reducing from 54 rooms in the hotel down to 40 units, and then going down to the 29 units, and also reading the report on your website by Mr. Mason of the Mason Engineering Consultants, whereby he covered all of the articles such as the supply of surfaces to and from the building, and also the parking restrictions or parking ability that would be there, and of course how that has been reduced by the reduction in the number of units. And of course, finally, I would like to say that having our agreement from our petition that's on the website as well, of an overall majority of our residents, some who were not able to take part in the petition because of their infirmities, others have not been able to take part because of actually their properties having been up for sale and them having moved out. But we did have a good majority of 28 residents as against a potential 34 that were available to vote. So we are in accordance with the plan, and of course, last but not least, as if this and when this gets its planning permission and gets underway and gets finished, we will be presented with a building that is refurbished, very pleasant to look at, and not at the moment, as we have been looking for some time, a mounting of scaffolding, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Members. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Could I ask a couple of questions? Ian, could you point out where Casey's Bar is on your map?
Before Anna runs over that, no, I've no idea where Casey's Bar. I know it's in the locality, speaking to the officers with greater knowledge of Portsmouth. I can obviously get that information for you by asking the team.
So, Darren, do you know where it is? Or does anybody else know where it is?
Round the back.
Round the back of what?
No, can we find out? We'll find out. Any other questions?
Yeah, okay, second one. I'm conscious that there is an off-road car park as part of the hotel. The planning permission we're talking about was from 2010, and therefore presumably has, we need to be aware of it that it was granted, but that it has now lapsed. I'm surprised that there's been no recommendation here that part of the car park for the hotel, which is off the street, should be provided for these flats, because this is half the hotel going. Should we not therefore be saying that some of the hotel car park should be associated with this development? And finally, can I ask about the provision of, because again I can't see it in the report, about solar panels and low carbon energy production on this site, as it's south facing, and therefore the solar panels should zing away.
Car parking, first of all, so obviously a very key material consideration is the extant permission, implemented permission from 2010 that enabled them to build 40 units. That did not require any of the hotel's car park to be reattributed to the residential wing. Indeed, that car park space, that rear extension, was proposed for redevelopment itself. To reduce the parking, so as 40 units were acceptable without any on-site parking, we are satisfied 29 is equally acceptable. Obviously there is a retained hotel at the moment which has its own parking demand, so as always it's a balance of needs to be looked at there, but in light of that extant permission, that's been the overriding judgment informing both the Highway Authority and indeed the Planning Authority in bringing that recommendation forward. Photovoltaics, again, much as my previous answer, we don't prescribe solar panels. I'm not saying it would be inappropriate, it may be perfectly appropriate to have photovoltaics on this side. It is for the applicant to demonstrate how they're going to comply with the above building regs issue under Part L that's in that sustainable construction condition, and it may well be that photovoltaics will form part of that. It may be that alternative methods will be utilised to do so. As the agent noted, they have flagged that the document L1A should be replaced with L1B, which my officers have included in the SMAT. Actually, it's both parts of that which need to apply because there is new build in the form of the mansard roofs as well. But the Part L provides a whole suite of different options available, and as mentioned earlier, it's a part that is being, has a step change in alteration towards that zero carbon goal of national guidance coming in this year, which will be down to the applicant to decide how they best meet that. And so I would not be surprised if it included photovoltaic, but equally there may be other more cost-effective, more effective methods of conserving fuel or producing energy.
We've got an answer about location of Casey's place.
I will have one for you shortly.
Councillor Mason.
I'm concerned about the 4 one-bedroom flats, which are not just marginally below our housing standard SPD, but they're considerably below, 23% below what we have got as our normal standard. 2 questions on that. Is this required because of the existing structure of the building, that these flats could not under any circumstances be bigger? And secondly, where are these located in the building? Are there things which we might take into consideration as mitigation, such as a beautiful view or a balcony or something of the sort?
Apologies, sir. I'm trying to multitask with the question. First of all, could you repeat that question for me? I didn't catch the first part.
Concern about the one-bedroom flats. They are so much smaller than our SPD. Is this required by the structure of the building that they could not be bigger? And secondly, are there other things which make these more desirable? We could say this mitigates the fact that they are so small.
Ask Anna to put the presentation back up and I'll take you through that. As I say, while they do fall below the, if you will, the standard size for flats, so we are talking about on this table, there we go, flats 9, 10, 14, 15, 19, 20, 24 and 25. You can see each one of them there. We've got 42.86 against a 55 square metre requirement and a 62.48 against a 70 square metre. That's the shortfall we're talking about. It is these units here which fall below those requirements. And are they a requirement for it? Yes and no. What I've done is I've just pulled up the floor plan of the same diagram from the 2010 issue. As you can see, hopefully by flashing between the two of them, these flats, there are walls being constructed there to enable an access into this flat. In the previous scheme, actually it was a totally different layout, and thus they had a greater space to get a larger flat in. So if you're dividing your core at this point, there's not much else you can do with that, but this is part of that broader set of improvements, as the applicant contends, to get more larger flats into it. I would stress, however, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, while 62.5 is less than 70, obviously less than the standard, that's the requirement for a 2-bed, 4-person flat. If it's to be used as a 2-bed, 3-person flat, the requirement is only 61, and it does meet that. Now, we don't prescribe that a degree of detail in the planning process. It comes up in private sector housing more often. But if you can look, and hopefully this is clear enough, if I can get this to work. If you can look at the flats, this is the 2-bed flat here. I think it is reasonable to assume that the architect's intention for this, and apologies, I lost my mouse, is to be a double room and a single room, so a 2-bed, 3-person flat with a requirement of 61, not 70, and at 62.5, it does meet the standard. And similarly with the 1-bed flat, again looking at the size of the and orientation of the bedroom, one would assume far more likely to be a 1-bed, 1-person flat, and the standard for that is 39 rather than 50, 50 being the 1-bed, 2-person flat standards. Apologies to be saying so many numbers at you, but it really does depend on the nature of that future occupation. These flats, while on that table fall below those standards, do meet national space standards if they are occupied in that way. Obviously the planning authority doesn't dictate who can live in what flat, but again there's a degree of market choice around this. You'd struggle to get a double bed, I'd suggest, in those smaller bedrooms, and consequently there is a perfectly reasonable likelihood of people occupying them fully in accordance with the national standard, national space standards, and consequently no breach of our policies to promote the high quality of living environment for future residents.
Thanks, Chris. Ian, are any of the flats in the current application smaller than those in the extant consent?
I would have to go rummaging all the way through it. I can say they're all the previous one were all fully compliant with it, so I would say no. They've got a more larger flats, but they do have those smaller 1-bed, 1-person flats. It's obviously only so much floor space to play with, so they've obviously got to cut the cake. So I think what you're looking at is more 2-bed flats, albeit we've now got a mixture of 2-bed, 3-person flats and 2-bed, 4-person flats, when the previous scheme had more 1-bed, 2-person flats and 2-bed, 3-person flats, I would anticipate. But without doing a full numerical analysis of the two schemes, I couldn't tell you. I think the key message I do want to repeat is, notwithstanding the concerns we've raised, we are satisfied this is a good quality living environment because residents can occupy this 1-bed, 1-person flat fully in accordance with national space standards, or this 2-person, 3-bed flat fully in accordance. Sorry, 2-bed, 3-person flat fully in accordance with national space standards. Clearly, if they wanted to over-occupy the flat, that would start impacting. But that is always the case. Members will have heard my discussions on this in the past, on how people choose to use the different rooms in their homes. It's not for us to dictate how you can do it. You could put a pair of bunk beds in this single-person issue if you have 2 small children, for example. That's why we don't manage those issues. They do meet the requirements for 1-person, 1-bed, 1-person flats and 2-bed, 3-person flats, and consequently there is no legitimate reason to withhold planning permission.
Right, so in your judgment, Ian, if we were to refuse it on the grounds that it doesn't meet our space standards, which for people who don't know is an issue that this committee has raised more than once as a reason for determining and not determining applications, we would lose at appeal.
Absolutely, the applicant would simply turn up and say, we have no intention that the future residents would try and over-occupy the buildings, but if they do, what on earth can we do about those once we've sold them in the modern market? They do meet your space standards, albeit it's for 1-person, 1-bed flats and 3-person, 2-bed flats, rather than, as the report said, the alternative. So, yes, it would be an unsustainable reason for refusal.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Can I therefore ask, I presume therefore there is a condition that says that the one-bedroom flat can only be occupied by one person and the two-bedroom can only be occupied by three people?
Absolutely not. As I said, we're not here to say we are making sure there are quality living environments. If someone chooses to occupy it in a different way, they can do so. Someone could move into your house and, you know, have more children and have to put bunk beds in. This wouldn't be an unreasonable living environment. It is not for the planning authority to try and do that sort of micromanagement of a future occupier.
Any more questions? Comments? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
I'd like to recommend refusal on the basis that those units are far too small and we should not be building the slums of the future. We have a responsibility to make sure that people have got decent places to live. These fall below the space standards that we have, and therefore I don't think we have any choice but to refuse.
Thank you. Any other comments? We have a proposal. No seconder yet. Anybody else? Any takers? Councillor Mason.
Yes, I'll second that. The smaller two-bedroom flats don't worry me, but it is these very small one-bedroom flats that I am concerned about. They are so much below our standards, the standards which we have set for ourselves, that I think it will be setting an unfortunate precedent were we to let that go ahead.
Okay, we have a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Can we put the plan up of that floor again? Because I think that's a very, very simple solution from the developer's point of view.
And Chairman, I must interrupt, I will need some full wording, policy backing, obviously, for any proposed reason for refusal.
So, is it possible to put that back? So, the previous application, the corridor went further to the right there, and if the corridor went further to the right as it did in the previous application, and the first room in the purple three-bed at the northeast on here, that room became part of one of the other flats. You could increase both those flats to make it bigger so that they could achieve the space standard. So there's a very, very simple solution available to the developer to be able to meet the space standards.
Chairman, I do have to interrupt. And to be absolutely clear, this application meets your space standards. It meets the standards for a reduced occupancy, but that is not. There is a multiplicity of space standards. This meets the space standards for a one-person or one-bed, one-person flat and a two-bed, three-person flat. So consequently, any attempt to refuse on this issue has no chance of success on appeal.
Chair, if we were allowed to put in a condition to say that there could only be one person in the one that is defined for one person, then that would meet my concern. But because we're being told we can't do that, the only option that we have is to say no to this, because it clearly falls below our space standards, and therefore we have to throw it out.
Well, we have a proposer and a seconder to refuse. Anybody else? Councillor Sanders.
Chris, I'm confused. Is there anything to stop us from introducing a condition, anything to stop us from introducing a condition which says that the flats that fall below our space standards should be occupied by two-bed, three persons and one-bed, one person? Is there anything to stop us from voting on that?
The problem you have, Councillor, is that it is, well, I've never seen such an occupation condition placed on a C3 unit. As Ian has given the advice repeatedly now, it's very difficult to justify that as being necessary. The advice quite clearly, and it's a premise issue that you've got in terms of your arguments as you disagree with officers, is that you're being told that it does comply with the policy in a particularly nuanced way. I can appreciate that. But that's the problem with it. It's fundamentally the planning professional judgment is from the officers, and we anticipate the inspectorate, is that such a condition wouldn't be allowed. But also, as a matter of first principle, the problem that you're foreseeing, this
alleged breach with policy doesn't arise in the first place.
I understand that, but Kieran, the issue is that the publicly available papers say that 8 of the flats fall below the space standards. If the publicly available papers had said it's the space standards for 2-bed, 3-person, 1-bed, 1-person, I suspect none of us would have known the difference, and it would have been absolutely fine. I think the issue we've got is that the papers we have say that this falls below our space standards, but we're also being told by the planning team that it doesn't. And those two things are not the same.
Well, you need to take into account the totality of the evidence, of which the papers are obviously core, but the advice that you've received is part of the information that goes into the planning balance that you need to weigh this afternoon. So it's entirely proper that you can accept the advice that Ian Maguire has given you this afternoon, even if it's more orally based than actually having been set out in full detail in the report. That is legitimate.
Okay. Anybody else? The only thing on the table is Councillor Vernon-Jackson's motion to refuse. So we need some words.
That 8 flats fall below the space standard as set out by the City Council, and that we are advised we cannot put a condition on to limit occupation to the numbers for the smaller space standard. Therefore, we have no option but to refuse it because it falls below the space standard.
I would ask them that we take 5 to 10 minutes to adjourn between Ian and I to discuss some wording on that basis.
Okay. 5 minutes? 5 minutes, everybody.
I believe Councillor Sanders is doing an interview and has other business at this time.
Yes, indeed. So he shall be absent.
He's left the meeting. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Mason.
Would you like to tell us the form of words?
Yes, thank you. I'm just checking my notes, and as much as it's a motion from Councillor Vernon Jackson, seconded by Councillor Mason, because obviously Sanders was asking some pertinent questions before he's now left subsequent to the adjournment. Ian Maguire has the form of words for your consideration to be adopted as part of Councillor Vernon Jackson's motion.
Before I get to the form of words, just to answer the question of where the affordable housing was re-provided, in case that's material for members to say, and with apologies around my accuracy, it was actually further up near the city centre, Common Street, that the Harley Court development was delivered to provide on the previous Casey's Bar location. So it's not in the immediate locality, but that was obviously deemed the appropriate delivery mechanism for the previous, as I say, larger scheme for affordable housing. Form of words. So to translate the issue as raised, obviously we need clarity in it. So the concern raised by members is that the flats, and that's 9, 10, 14, 15, 19, 20, 24 and 25 as laid out in that table, are below the adopted space standards described in the Portsmouth Housing Standards SPD, and therefore one would assume fails to provide a good standard of living as required by PCS 23 of the Portsmouth Plan 2012. Members, I will make one final statement that obviously it does not fail to meet your housing standards, and consequently I would strongly recommend against trying to impose a reason for refusal on this basis, but as always the decision is yours.
Thank you, Ian. Are you happy with that form of words? Yes.
Very happy.
Okay. Okay, so the one motion we have on the table is Councillor Vernon Jackson's, seconded by Councillor Mason. Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? Kieran?
That was 5 votes in favour of refusal, none against, and 1 abstention. Apologies, 2 abstentions.
Councillor Vernon Jackson's motion passes.
So, Plan Commission is refused on the basis of the reason given earlier.
Thank you, everybody. I'm aware that some people need to leave. Councillor Fielding at 2. Is it a definite 2? Be able to go for the next one? Yep, okay, all right, good, okay. Cockleshell Community Sports Club.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a retrospective application for the construction of a temporary gazebo. I'll come back to that word temporary in a moment, and proposed construction of a storage shed at Cockleshell Community Sports Hub. So this is part of that wider open space behind or near to the barracks, which is obviously used by a number of different sporting facilities. You can see, hopefully from this plan here, the timber gazebo on the left of the site and the proposed metal shed over on the right-hand side of the site. The metal shed, it's a metal shed, I won't bore you with the details, looks like that, and is located, anticipated roughly where that cross is, adjacent to those hard surface courts. The timber gazebo is existing. It was installed on the 1st of July 2020. It's about 4.5 metres by 4.5 metres, 2.9 metres high, 3.3 metres away from that northern boundary. It's understood it was put in as a COVID prevention measure, so those who wish to change their shoes, etc., didn't have to go into the enclosed buildings on the site to do so when such things were obviously of great concern. However, the applicant wishes to retain the timber gazebo for a temporary period, as it still serves a useful purpose on that basis. key issue obviously is the proximity of that gazebo to adjacent residential properties, 12 Cockleshell Gardens in particular here, who will have a degree of disturbance, one would assume, from people congregating in this area that otherwise may not have done so. There's a number of constructed buildings across the site, so while we do seek to minimise the total number of buildings in our open spaces in the city, we do of course have policies that quite sensibly recognise reasonable facilities to support those outdoor sports and recreations are necessary, so adding the other 2 new buildings to this collection is not deemed to be unacceptable in an open space perspective. Key issue for members to say impact on that open space and impact on the residents, both of which officers find to be acceptable. If they are acceptable on a temporary basis, it isn't open to and required of us to consider whether they are indeed acceptable on a permanent basis, because everything you grant is permanent unless you condition it to be otherwise. Because it is acceptable on its own merits, officers are satisfied a temporary limitation on time is not actually necessary for this building, and while the applicant may choose to remove it in a future date if they no longer have use for it, we do not feel that is a necessary requisite condition and thus doesn't meet the necessary tests to require it to be removed, and therefore, notwithstanding the description, we are happy to recommend the grant of the permanent retention of that gazebo as well as the permanent metal shed further east in the site. The recommendation is to grant accordingly, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ian. Okay. Jane Mills, hello. Thank you for your patience. 6 minutes for your deputation.
It won't take 6 minutes. I'm Jane Mills. I'm a trustee from Cockleshell Community Sports Club. Having done a pre-application, they suggested that we have the gazebo on a temporary basis for planning permission. Having read your recommendations, we would actually like the gazebo to stay up as time has gone through. Originally, it was up for COVID, where children change out of their tracksuits, change their footwear to play sports, and have somewhere dry to keep their clothes whilst they're playing sports. We like to give children and people that use the site the option. They can go inside in the newly refurbished pavilion, or they can use the outside changing area. It's entirely up to them. As time's gone on, we have many hirers that have been very keen on using the gazebo. Next week we've got Connor's Toy Library there, where they're using it for mother and baby area, for changing facilities, for feeding facilities, so it's out of the sunlight. There's very little shading area on Cockleshell because it is all sports land, so lots of our children, when it's blazing hot, have been using it for shelter. So what I'm asking is, please could you, if planning permission is granted, could we have it on a permanent basis? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Just wondered if we could propose to move the officer's recommendations now and see if we can put that recommendation in where we can have it permanently.
Well,
would that be okay?
Ian, I think it's okay anyway, isn't it?
Is if you don't put a condition on saying it must be removed, by definition it is a permanent permission.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so anybody? Yep, Councillor New.
Happy to second that. This looks fantastic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's you've waited a long time for something that's not going to take very much time to come to a resolution. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Chairman, I just think that for the sake of clarity, this is a piece of land that is owned by the council, which I instigated buying to stop developers getting their hands on it. I think it's because as I'm as leader of the council, I have the property portfolio within my area. I think it's a personal but non-prejudicial interest again.
I mean, it's by virtue of your office. I don't think it even really hits the threshold for personal properly, but yeah, it's appreciated that you've made that declaration to the room. I don't see that it gives a conflict of any kind. No.
Great, and I think it's wonderful.
I suspect we may all echo that. Okay, we've got proposer, seconder. Let's go to anybody else? No? Okay, all in favour? I hope you've waited nearly 4 hours for that. I do apologise.
I hope it was interesting. I hope it was interesting. Good.
I suspect our definition of interesting might be different. Thank you. Atalanta Close. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a change of use of part of an access drive to some rear garages and rear accesses from that use to be incorporated within a garden area with associated new boundary fencing. So that is for Atalanta Close. That is the access drive through to these garages to the rear. This is a retrospective application. Members can see on the left-hand side of this bungalow the new fencing and can probably work out indeed where the previous boundary, physical boundary, not ownership boundary, existed. Here we see an image taken prior to that alteration. In effect, this land, which is owned by this house, was open and used as a footway to this rear access drive. The applicant has, if you will, sort of realised the benefits they can have by incorporating it and building it out to the edge of their property ownership, which is the edge of the carriageway, and I'll put that in parenthesis because it's only a private driveway, and have wanted therefore to incorporate that and have done so. The key implication, and indeed a concern raised by our highway authority, is the fact that previously there was, as you can see here, a footway to enable people to walk out without any conflict, or with limited conflict, with vehicles using the driveway, and now obviously they must share that space, that driveway space, with any vehicles coming in and out of that area. However, we are overall satisfied that while there is secondary access to 5 dwellings from this driveway and 9 garages back there, indeed those 14 users, if you will, do not make such large risk, especially when there's adequate visibility retained for vehicle movements, etc. And it's a relatively short stretch of private driveway. That is a legitimate reason to withhold planning permission, and consequently the recommendation is to grant planning permission.
Again, you've waited a while. 6 minutes to give you a
say
deputation.
good morning, but it's now afternoon.
That's wishful thinking.
First, I would like to say we asked the Land Registry Office about moving the fence a few years ago. They said that the contractors that built the estate were no longer in business, so there will be no one to ask if we could take some of the path along the drive to the garages, which went along the side of our property, and said there wouldn't be a problem. We honestly didn't know we had to get planning permission. When we first moved here 12 years ago, the path was very overgrown with weeds and lots of damaged concrete. So my husband cleared the weeds and repaired the concrete because nobody else took responsibility for it. We've kept it clean and tidy since. We measured the width of the drive down to the garages and found the measurements of the emergency services. The ambulance and fire engines both can get through with plenty of space. Even a furniture delivery lorry, which went down the drive a few weeks ago, and a building material lorry have the space. Nobody ever used the footpath. Everybody just walked along the tarmac drive. Not one of the garages is used to put a car in. All are used for storage. Cars would occasionally go down to get the car washed or drop off shopping at the back of the garages into the garden. The reason we moved the fence was to give us a little extra space in our garden, as the path wasn't used for anything and we didn't take all of the path. I would like to add that there have been no accidents or problems whatsoever to or from the garages, and neighbours have commented that it is now tidy and more secure. Thank you for listening.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for that deputation. Members, questions? Comments? Missed me. Councillor Mason first.
My only concern had been about the access of emergency vehicles. And since emergency vehicles can get down there, and obviously furniture van can, I see no reason why they should not go forward, and I propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor New.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Bernard Jackson.
Likewise.
Well, that is proving quite straightforward. Okay, we have a proposer, seconder. Anybody else? To the vote, to those in favour?
Unanimous grant of planning permission.
I'm sorry we couldn't get that done earlier for you. You have your planning permission.
Thanks very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Hope it wasn't too painful.
Chair,
yeah.
It was okay. Can I duck out now?
Of course, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, there you go. Just the...
Sorry.
You're very welcome. Councillor Weems, are you okay to... Okay, all right, good. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, George. Okay, we move on. Burburn Road. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the change of use from a dwelling house to a dual use of either dwelling house or house of multiple occupancy in Class C4. So there is the site, there is the dwelling, there is the standard assessment of the number of dwellings within the locality, which have already been converted to use Class C4 or other HMO. There are 67 properties within that search area. None are HMO, so consequently this would be the first one. 1.49% HMOs, well below your 10% requirements. Wrong one. That is your layout for the proposed dwelling. Works have commenced on conversion already, as you can see. The size of the proposed rooms are detailed in a table under paragraph 5.11 and fully meet your requirements for the reasonable living environments for an HMO of this size, and consequently, in full accordance with your policies, plan permission is recommended to be granted.
Thank you. So, one deputation. Mr. Mills. Over to you. 6 minutes on the clock.
Perfect. I'll try and keep it quick because I know I've been here quite a while. So we're seeking planning permission for a change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a C4 house of multiple occupation, falling under Class 4 C use for 6 bedrooms. Firstly, I must explain that the applicant property is owned by a private individual. Sorry, I'm just setting a timer. I represent him today. He's looking to provide quality accommodation for young people. My business manages the process for the investor, Mr. Hubbard. My business is a small, local, family-owned business, which is operated by myself and my wife. We've heavily invested in our business from personal savings, and particularly during the recent pandemic, we were personally liable for all costs associated with running this business. It's affected my family directly, and as such, this is a hugely emotive subject for me. Secondly, I must mention that we did attempt to consult all of the immediate neighbours during the application process. Sadly, despite our invitation on many, many occasions to come and see some of our existing properties to meet existing neighbours of operational HMOs, as well as consulting existing tenants that we have, we've not been taken up on our offer. As such, I believe those in opposition to these proposals are in some cases objecting while ill-informed of the reality of our operation. Sadly, rather than engage with me, one of the particular neighbours has set various timeframes for returning party wall agreements, etc., and has failed to do so. She's also continuously slammed the door on me and harassed me, including following me down the road. Just to confirm that the works that we've carried out so far are the permitted development works and they're not HMO, so we haven't started any works that we shouldn't have done so. I've lived in Portsmouth since my childhood, having been educated in the city, and I've spent many happy years here watching the city evolve and improve. I've personally been involved in HMOs since I was 21, which is in 2008, and I bought my first HMO while working for a local letting agency. I went on to complete Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors accredited degree in property planning and development, and I owned a letting agency in the city and in London Road in North End as well as in Southsea for 7 years. We predominantly specialised in HMO management, and we enjoyed a fantastic reputation. I'm a member of the Association of Residential Letting Agents and the National Association of Estate Agents, as well as several other landlord and letting agency bodies. Indeed, I currently carry out consultancy work for other agencies around HMO management. All of our staff members for the lettings are currently studying for or already qualified agents. We also offer a mentoring service currently to students about HMO conversions. We employ over 50 local subcontractors for our conversion of the properties, and as such, the conversion of this property provides direct benefits to others within the city. We recently had one of the council licensing officers, who sadly retired, visit one of our managed properties. He mentioned that in his 16 years within the council, our properties are one of the highest standards and most compliant properties he's ever visited. In terms of locality, there are currently only 2 HMOs in Thurburn Road, numbers 76 and 77, although these don't count towards the count of HMOs as they're not within 50-metre radius. Allowing this HMO will only result in 1.49% of the 67 properties within 50 metres being HMOs, which obviously complies with the planning policy and represents significantly fewer than the maximum 10% allowed. This property was purchased on the open market and was very dated when purchased by my client. It was available for a significant period of time prior to being purchased. I say this to demonstrate that there was ample opportunity for this property to be purchased by any other owner or occupier, but they weren't able to do so. There was very little interest before we identified the opportunity. I'm aware that one of the concerns is around parking, and I note the planning officer's supportive comments regarding the conversion with regards to parking. But I'd like to further extrapolate that according to the latest figures we have available, only 7% of HMO tenants in this city have cars. This particular property, all 6 of the bedrooms are at least 150% of the size required by planning policy, so they're very large rooms. The communal space, including the lounge, is also well over 150% of the required space. Clearly that this means that the property is compliant with space standards and represents a brilliant opportunity and the perfect property for us to convert into a usable and very desirable property for young professionals. The works we're carrying out are all carried out under permitted development, and that is to say that the works themselves do not require planning permission. The only thing that we need planning for is the occupation of the property by more than 2 unrelated individuals. Portsmouth, according to the last credible set of data available, has a working age population of 62%, with an average age of between 30 and 35. It also, for the last 18 years, has had a year-on-year increase in population, particularly in this demographic. Portsmouth is currently one of the most densely populated cities in Europe and enjoys an incredible reputation for its employment opportunities for young people. Sadly, as councillors will be aware, and as we've seen today, there's currently an undersupply of properties for the private rental sector, particularly for those young professional people. Compared with other local cities, Portsmouth has a much older stock of properties due to its history. Sadly, there are currently 4,270 HMOs in the city, many of which are definitely not fit for purpose. They don't facilitate en-suites, and indeed they're not big enough to facilitate en-suites. In our experience and in our opinion, the development of these high-quality, well-managed HMOs will overall increase the standard of HMO accommodation within the city, and it is my hope that it will likely result in the improvement of the low-quality HMOs as they become unviable, and potentially they will result in their return back to the private rental sector as smaller, much more needed family homes. We inspect the properties every week, and the communal areas are cleaned weekly. We have digital contact with the tenants 24 hours a day. We use a maintenance system to report any maintenance issues, and during the development we also ensure the property achieves a minimum of an EPC C rating, which is a significant improvement on its current rating, and it also future-proofs the property for rentals. Our last completed development, the last room let within 1 hour, and we have had over 30 disappointed applicants. I say this only to highlight the standard of our rooms and the need for them amongst the target audience. We recently renovated a very tired, poor quality HMO for someone else, and we let 6 rooms within 7 days. The location of this property has, in our experience, an undersupply of properties for professional young people, and I'd lastly compare this property. We rent the rooms for £700 a month, including all bills. Your average one bedroom now is between 800 and 900 plus bills, so you're looking about 1,500 all inclusive. This represents a great opportunity for young people to move away from home or move into our city and to have good quality accommodation. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope you look favourably on our application.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, can I just add, from the SMAT, Councillor Peter Harris did submit a late letter, written deputation. Obviously, members can read at their leisure.
Have members read the deputation?
Would it be possible if I read Councillor Peter Harris's deputation? Just let me know when you're ready. Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. I'm sorry that I'm unable to attend today in person due to work commitments. Unlike the last planning committee, there is only one HMO on the agenda, and it is this one. While it is universally stated that our policies are robust, I believe the time is here to argue for a special policy to protect our island from overdevelopment and a proliferation of HMOs. Fairburn Road is adding 6 more persons to a property which was once a family home, multiple people coming and going at different hours, multiple cars added to an already congested road, more strain on the sewage and water systems, more negative externalities to our other residents, more of the same within Portsmouth. Fairburn Road sits off of London Road, which is a major artery within our city. This road has had several accidents recently and is heavily congested throughout the day. I believe there is simply not enough space for adequate parking or cars in general, and residents often find themselves parking in other areas due to the lack of parking on the road. I do not believe that a 6-bedroom HMO will have 1 or 2 occupiers with cars. I think the developers feel councillors are often stupid or do not read between the lines. I know this committee is one which has the guts to stand up to developers. The Parking Standard SPD is a document which needs to be enforced, but also updated to reflect the current changes within our society. I ask that the committee to consider whether 6 people in an area which contains very little office space will mean that each occupier will travel outside of Portsmouth, potentially to their workplace. The only inference from this means that they will own a car. Where are they going to park? This will cause wider displacement of vehicles, and residents parking their cars will drive around and round. How is that good for the pollution levels in our city? I have spoken to many residents who are sick of HMOs coming into their road, and I agree with several residents I have spoken to. They change the character of the area, and they believe the problem is the scale of development, which they feel they are powerless to stop. I just do not see how we can justify this application unless the house was actually big enough to accommodate the amount on the application. I do not believe it is. Making fundamental changes to the property and forcing residents to live on top of each other while impacting the local amenity is not the answer. Thank you for your consideration today.
Thank you. I can't believe anybody might think councillors are stupid. Councillor Simpson.
Just want to follow up, essentially, Scott's statement, read very eloquently by Daniel. I've also had multiple emails this week with the concerns that this HMO is opposite a block of flats, of adding a lot more parking issues.
Is this a question? Or?
No, it isn't, sorry. It's more of a comment, sorry.
Okay.
Beg your pardon.
Just a quick one, Chair. As I've read Councillor Scott Pay Harris's deputation, does that in any way affect my ability to determine this application?
No, Councillor Williams, you were just a mouthpiece.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions? We'll come to comments. Oh, we're going to come to you now anyway, aren't we? After all that. Okay, carry on.
So thank you. Yes, the impact of an HMO so close to flats will greatly increase parking, as well as, I'm guessing, nitrate to the area. I know that's normally per household, but as well as further rubbish and in general, it's I think the surrounding areas are also having issues as well, where they're even having to park down this road as it stands from other roads. I know that's a little bit off key, but I just want to make aware that it's not just this one road, it's a whole area, that whole particular area of multiple roads. So I believe it's not going to be ideal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Mason first.
I come from the south of the city, where we have many, many HMOs. We're going to have HMOs in this city, whether we like it or not, because we cannot produce enough housing to meet the needs of the city. So there are going to be HMOs. The real question is, where? I think that we should seek to have as wide a distribution of HMOs as possible. They do create problems, yes. Even when very well managed, they do create problems, and the parking problem is one of them. So I think that to concentrate them in one area, such as Old Portsmouth, and which I think you know well, would be a mistake. And so, because there are relatively few in this neck of the woods, I think that this is a reasonable place to have an HMO. It doesn't increase the numbers unduly, even if we take the wider view of the road. And so I would support the propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Weems.
I obviously have objected to HMOs in the past, and I do thank you for coming today and actually giving an explanation as to why you feel that it is a good development. That would be quite welcome if other landlords and operators did that. My concern kind of echoes from Councillor Simpson's problems is the parking provision. It states quite clearly in paragraph 5.19 that there's an under provision of 0.5 spaces. It just seems to come to a head where every time we have a HMO, parking just isn't a reason for refusal, which I disagree with. We live in a city that is often run by parking permits, and most people do own cars. I understand putting bike racks and everything is a wonderful thing, but I always have concerns where in the north of the city there isn't any office space. So to actually get to places of work, often people drive. And in other areas of the ward, there are HMOs, and I've gone down them and they have multiple cars, and I speak with residents and they have multiple cars. No one's using these bikes. Having 6 people in this HMO, although it looks great on paper, and I understand that they go above and beyond the space setting, I don't believe that 6 people aren't going to own a car. I feel like 6 of them will, and for that reason, I would say that should be a reason for refusal, and I'll take officers' advice on that. Thank you.
So I think that the only advice I can give is, we are unable to base our judgments on what we believe. We have to have evidence, and our last evidence demonstrated that the degree of car ownership on a large home, which obviously with the permitted general conversions this is highly comparable, if not the same, as a HMO. As the judgment from the Highway Authority, as detailed in the report says, there is a slight under-provision for parking provision on that basis, but in terms of turning that into a justifiable reason for refusal, it is unsustainable on appeal. It's obviously relatively located. London Road has a number of bus routes on it to enable connection to the wider city, and to withhold plan permission for that reason would have, in my professional opinion, no chance of success on appeal. Obviously, the applicant's agent has suggested a percentage of what they feel is car ownership for HMOs. We have no way of validating that, but it is unsurprising to hear that car ownership for HMOs would be lower than for standard dwellings as a basic output of economic reality. What we are satisfied with is that the parking implications that may exist would be sufficiently minor to outweigh the benefits of providing the additional accommodation that an HMO does provide in comparison to a single occupancy dwelling. In this location where there are no other HMOs in the immediate vicinity and only a few other in the wider vicinity, it is an ideal location therefore to allow this change of use and intensification of occupation.
Any further comments, Councillor Vernon Jackson?
Chair, as you all know, I am no fan of HMOs, but I am struggling with this one. The government are clearly very keen on HMOs, and therefore our powers are restricted. My understanding is that we have the strongest policies in terms of restricting HMOs of any council in the area, and yet this falls way below the 10% limit. Even if it was 5% limit, it would still fall way below it. The space standards for the rooms are significantly above the space standards that we ask for. The applicant has attempted to work with neighbours, and the proposal at the moment to say no is based on it being half a car parking space down. I just think I'm very happy to turn things down when they are wrong. But at the moment, in terms of policy, I can't see a justifiable reason that turns this down, which is in any way sustainable and won't be overturned at appeal. The previous one, I maybe disagreed with Ian, because I think we did have a policy that's sustainable. But this one, I really don't see. I'm very happy if people can come up with justifiable reasons that will work, and where planning permission is going to be denied at appeal. I'm very happy to listen to that, as always, because I don't like HMOs. But on this case, I don't think anybody has given me a reason for me to say no to it. But I'm very open to being persuaded.
Well, we currently have the officer's recommendation has been moved by Councillor.
Yeah, but there's clearly opposition to that, and I'm if there is, and there's going to be something else, I need somebody to persuade me with some policy, which isn't Councillor Mason, because he's proposed the other way around.
I was going to say, where we're at is we have a proposer for the officer's recommendations. Anybody want to help Councillor Van Jackson with his dilemma?
Where is the bike store located, quickly? I just can't seem to find it on this picture.
Yes, I don't think we've got a plan for the bike store. Obviously, this, as you can see from the extract from the Ordnance Survey on page 86 above paragraph 5.5, this site has a rear access, so they've got the whole of the rear garden to utilise for bike storage. So what we've required is, under condition 4, that they, prior to first occupation, provide a bike storage that meets the needs of your SPD, which is for cycle storage, and permanently retain it. So I would anticipate they'll choose to do that in the accessible rear garden.
Okay, and there's only condition we can put on for overdevelopment of a property, just because I have no issue with a HMO that sits within how big the property is. So obviously, having 6 people, I'm just looking through the actual size, and yeah, the rooms in the second floor look big enough. But my concern is access up to this floor. So I'm just looking at what possibility is there in lowering the amount of people we can put in there at all.
It is incumbent upon you to judge the application in front of you. The application is for a use class C4, which is up to 6 people in occupation, and as it meets, may exceed your room size requirements, there will be no justification to refuse it on that basis, and you can't amend their application and put something else in its place.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of leaning towards what Gerald has said, admittedly, which is frustrating, but like you say, I have to judge it on its merits, and the rooms are big enough, but I would have to see what obviously other councillors say as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? We currently do not have a seconder for...
Nobody's persuaded me otherwise. I think, therefore, I get no option but to second the proposal.
Okay, thank you. We have a proposer and a seconder to move the officer's recommendation. Anybody else? No? To the vote. 4. And against? Well, I think...
It's 3 in favour and 3 against, so it's a chair's casting vote.
Okay, well, I voted to move the officer's recommendations, and that's...
So the chair's casting vote carries it in favour of the grant of planning permission.
Okay, Last application. Crinoline, beautifully named, Crinoline Gardens.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the construction of a part two-storey, part single-storey side and rear extension. It is at 5 Crinoline Gardens. Again, we're in the Eastleigh Barracks area, the Eastleigh Barracks Conservation Area, and it backs on to Marine Court, which you can see here on the left of the image. A number of photos say it's got some lovely setting. You've got the Teapot Row building here, and obviously the wider heritage of Eastleigh Fort and Eastleigh Barracks. It is the end of a short run of terraced houses, the fifth in the row, as you can see there, and has consequently already had some alterations. That is the proposal. It is to build, basically to infill some of this space at the side and manage some of those pieces at the back. So you can see on here, that's the existing ground floor, and they're therefore proposing this side extension in that space there, and some alterations to the rear, and that first floor addition over part of that side extension. So that's their existing side extension with a front balcony. It has a screen there, and they're proposing to bring forward and put in place a first part single, part two-storey extension on that side, which hopefully you can see again from the rear. Same outcome. That is the area we are talking about. A number of protected trees in that area, with a number of consents actually under TPOs as laid out in paragraph 1.5 and 1.6 to be removed in the rears of Marine Court properties. Just some images. So that's our development site here on the far left. You can see the side extension they have with the opaque glass screen there. Another angle for the same thing, and that's the proximity of Marine Court, the most affected adjacent properties. That is a view from Marine Court facing towards the side. It's in this space here where the side extension would be built. Just some images of the young cherry trees, which were replacements for TPOs already consented, and the rather unwell holm oak that's also consented to be removed. I'll take you back to a useful image. That'll probably do. A straightforward householder extension. We have nothing in the SMAT and no deputations on this. The recommendation is to grant planning permission. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ian or Kieran? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
This is on the east of Marine Court, and it's going to take this right up to the boundary of people's gardens. In terms of loss of light, what's the view?
It's not quite right up to the boundary, but yeah, it comes absolutely closer. The degree of separation is deemed to be sufficiently wide so that the loss of light is not unreasonable.
Okay.
Anybody else? Councillor Weems.
Happy to propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, and I'm also mindful you've stayed longer than you
That's
probably
all right.
expected to. Thank you. Any other comments? Happy to second. If there's nothing else to the vote, for. I think that's,
Unanimous approval of planning permission.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's business. We'll close the meeting at 2:20. Thank you, everybody.